I'd like to call to order the Water District Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, June 27, 2024. And if I could have an establishment. Yes,
Okay,
this way.
Vice President Jordan,
Here,
Director Wheeler,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
and Director Bella.
Here.
We have a quorum.
perfect, thank you. And next on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I could ask our engineer to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Item 2, public comment. Do we have anything on Zoom?
I did not receive anything in writing.
Okay. And nothing on online?
Nothing.
Okay. Item 3, agenda review, additions, deletions, and pulled consent items. I'll start first by saying we will not be having a closed session at the end of the meeting tonight, so item 11 will go away. And do we have any other additions or
Are
deletions?
we supposed to have minutes from the special session on
We'll have them next.
next one?
Nothing? Okay. Nothing for item 4, item 5, consent agenda. Do we have any questions, comments on the consent agenda?
Yes, just one question on page 9. Very general question. Whole bunch of refund checks and return deposit items, ACH returns. Is there? I don't recall seeing this. Maybe I'm sure it's been there before. Can I get a sense of what that all is about?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a variety. Some are like hydrant meters, like temporary construction meters, that they return, deposit on. Sometimes, customers will overpay their bills, sometimes on purpose, sometimes on accident, and they'll realize that, oh wait, I actually want that back now. Request a refund, move out, sometimes, Monique, any other common examples?
When accounts are closed, if an account's closed and they have a balance, whatever is charged against their last bill, whatever it's, the balance is forward, gets refunded.
Okay. How does move outs work? If they, why do they get a refund?
It's,
Because they've overpaid.
it surprises to me the number of customers who, if their bills typically, on average $70, but they just always pay $90.
Hmm.
And they wind up with a balance and they just, track and manage it. That's how they prefer to do it. Usually works for us, but they'll have a good balance.
An ACH, that's just a checking account, is that?
I'm not sure what the ACH returns are. I'm assuming that they are,
They're
probably bills that were,
they're bounce backs.
NSFs.
Yeah, they're bounce backs from people who submit online payments. They're bounce backs, and the way we record in the system is there's no clean way to do it in the billing system, so we have to write a ghost check. So it still gets cleared out of our cash account.
So they attempted to pay, did something wrong. So that the money tried to get to us, got to us, we sent it back.
Yes.
That's basically.
Yes.
It. And said, pay someone, go away, buddy.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. I was just
Pay us by
curious.
checks.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to move the consent items.
I have one
Oh, sorry.
item on 5E. It looks like in the second paragraph, the third line in the middle, there's something that says district policy that S developers to deposit.
What page are you on, Kurt?
26.
26, the fiscal impact.
Oh, fiscal impact. Oh, that is developers, yeah, the district policy that developers deposit $5,000 for non-residential, so just, it's just not the right word in there.
Should be, I think it requires developers to deposit the $5,000.
Yeah.
Another question?
No, I don't need to include the consent agenda.
I'll second.
And this is no need to roll call this, correct? Correct. Okay, all those in favor, opposed? Okay, thank you. Item 6, hearing and appeals, none. Item 7, MPWD FY 2016 to 2024 Capital Improvement Program and 2016 COP Certificates of Participation Financing, item A.
Yeah, this is just a cleanup to the harbor project and work, Jubin's office typically provides construction management for our projects. We actually internally did the construction inspections. But this particular project had a couple things that, because Jubin's office intervened or was helping us with it, they spent more time than they budgeted. So we're just asking the board to amend the budget to the amount of $24,000 so that, his actual cost for the project can be trued up with the expenses.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
So the time from Jubin's office was in lieu of somebody else's time?
It
Was
was-
it budgeted for?
We had budgeted, or he budgeted so much for construction management. We ended up spending, or he ended up spending some more time helping us with a couple of issues. There was the issue with the county and the traffic signal at Harbor Industrial, and then there was also, what was the other,
There was a task order regarding the trench depth due to.
That's
rock
right.
And other challenges on the project. It just basically, our time is timing material when we give you an
I was gonna
estimate.
ask, so you just charged.
And we base it on previous projects, and this one just took a little bit longer. With our coordination with the county, when issues came up with the traffic signal, it took a little bit longer of our time.
How was that resolved anyway?
I could talk about it under here or under the engineer's report if you like.
We can do it later.
Well, I could talk about it now. if you
No,
want.
no, that's fine. Okay, that's fine.
It's not resolved.
He couldn't wait. He had to tell me, but thank
Well,
you.
I mean, that's the
All
short
right.
version of it. I'll give you the long version of it.
All right,
Okay,
no more questions from me.
any other questions or comments? Okay. Then we need to have a vote on this.
Well,
So I
it's
need a
an
resolution.
expense,
I
right?
need,
It's an expense, right? So
yeah,
we're gonna have to vote for it, yeah. So I'll move.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Director Vella,
Yes.
Director Wheeler,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
and Vice President Jordan.
Yes.
Make motion passes.
Perfect, thank you. Item 8, regular business agenda. Item A, consider resolution 24-10, calling for an election to be held on November 25th, 2024 for the election of 2 members of the governing board of directors representing districts 1 and 2 and approving the San Mateo County candidate policy form for special districts.
All right, so what this does is it allows us to be included on the county election ballot, both President Zuka and Director Vella will be up for re-election this November. So this is, the agreement and the resolution to allow that. We'll pay a cost to the county for our participation in the election of about $35,000. Or that's our estimate, that's what's budgeted. And if we don't do this, then we'll have to run our own election entirely, which will cost significantly more. And drive me absolutely bonkers, so. So yeah, this is standard and this is what we need to do to enable that.
In your email you sent me, Kat, we are divisions. That resolution the board accepted. I don't know who put district in there, but we are
Yeah.
divisions.
So we had put divisions in there, but district is the language that came from the county template,
Yeah.
so
as not to somehow get pushback
Yeah,
or issues with the county,
Sure.
we use the district.
Sorry, I didn't answer you
language.
since you sent it to me about within the past half hour. but-
Yeah, I know, but it's just, yeah, so, so this is where, this was sent to us, I think, 2 days before the last board meeting. So not time enough to get on the agenda unless it was an emergency, and it's due to the county, I believe it's the 3rd, it's sometime or middle of next week. Yeah. So next Wednesday, so we have to actually get it in their handbook. We don't want anything to go sideways.
And there, if I could just say, there is a typo on the resolution. The date should be June 27th, not July.
So we budgeted 35,000, right? Huh?
Yeah.
How much of that 35,000 normally do we normally spend?
That was based on the last election, and I think we added a little tiny bit of cushion for inflation, but it was, yeah, it should be roughly 35,000 that we will.
But that assumes that there's actually going to be
Right.
voting.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
If there's a
there's
vote,
no
then
voting.
we don't have to pay, I don't think we have to pay anything.
No,
Except whatever the
like
small
about 5,000 or
administrative
6,000.
fees.
Yeah,
No, no,
Yeah.
you still pay.
Yeah, but
because-
not the full
But less.
35,000.
No, no.
And it also depends how many other agencies are running folks, and they all are sharing in the cost.
Yeah. The half page versus quarter page.
So,
But a
But it's-
standalone, a
it's less
standalone,
than- huh?
you'd have to hire staff to do a standalone.
Of course, no,
election.
I mean, there's.
Yeah, yeah.
No question.
Yeah, so I mean, I think. So we're division, so I don't know if moving forward after we pass this part of it, do we work with the county to figure out for future? You know, I don't know if I'm just being nitpicky with the division versus district thing, but
You can try, but if they tell you to use what they want you to use, then you can just use what they want you to use.
so then we would just update our.
Well, I think it should be divisions, that's the right legal term, but they want you to say district,
District.
but it won't, doesn't impact anything, it's
Yeah.
just what they prefer to see.
And the Voters' Rights Act at the time allowed us to do whatever, right? So you could, and some are calling them divisions as well. I saw that and I thought it was all that, it was district, but I figured it must have come from the county like that.
Can't we go along with them for the election and go back to the actual thing when elections over?
yeah, I mean, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
for purposes of our website,
Yeah.
we're gonna say divisions.
Yeah.
In our own communications, we can say divisions, it's just in anything that they have to see and approve, let's use their language.
I'm gonna hand deliver it tomorrow, so I can ask.
See, bring the heads up, just bring the heads up.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll take a motion if someone wants to give one.
Motion to approve resolution 2024-10.
Second,
Roll call?
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Director Vella,
yeah,
Director Wheeler,
Yes.
and Vice President Jordan.
Yes, motion passes. All right. So Kat, you will not go bonkers.
Yes. Not sure you wanna handle it.
Okay, item B, consider resolution 2024-11 approving and adopting the records management policy for the Mid-Peninsula Water District effective June 28th, 2024.
All right, hand it over to Monique.
Okay, so I'm gonna give the intro and the background and then turn it over to Tammy, and then we'll do a little bit of double teaming. So when I was a management analyst, I did a lot of background and lead work on this, and it's really very satisfying to be able to bring this to the board and know that you guys are gonna have a really great records management policy that you'll be able to follow and be able to refer to, and you'll be able to have electronic records, and you'll be able to delete records, or I'm sorry, that's not the right term, destroy records. You won't have, big files full of records that somebody has to go through if there's a records request or litigation. So that is really, really nice. And I'm so thrilled to be able to bring this to you. And then, sorry. It will, when the final product is done, it'll be something a little bit similar to the policy manuals that we already have, though it'll just be a little bit smaller. And so, what? Was this your turn?
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Okay, and I can tell you the people that we,
These are the resources.
the resources that we use and reference in order to finish developing the policy. So we use the resources of the best management practices with California State Secretary of State's local government records management guides, the records management handbook that's prepared by the California Records and Information Management Program. It's part of the California State Archives and the California Office of the Secretary of State. The MPWD resolutions, which is 2005 to 2005-13, which were a couple of different records that had been destroyed and were reported by the district. Then there's this California Special Districts Association Records Retention Policy, which is number 3310, which is from its sample policy handbook. There's also records management policies and retention schedules of other special districts. And then there's relevant statutory and regulatory sources, including the California Government Code, California Code of Regulations, and the United States Code and the Code of Federal Regulations. So this is driven by a lot of legal information requirements and lots of information from the California State Secretary's Office. So, yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy.
So those professional standards are something that you guys have asked about before, especially Matt. I'm sorry that he's not here. He usually asks you, hey, what are the best management practices and the standards and the tools that you relied upon? And so that's a big list, right? And because it's so legally driven, I mean, given the Public Records Act and the California Government Code sections, there's little that we can invent. But there were so many different policies. So I took what Monique had drafted and she and an employee back then who was on light duty. I'll get into that, what you have to do. This was probably the easy part, even though it wasn't easy put together. It's just getting through the records to verify that when you do declare them obsolete and they're ready for destruction, you're destroying the right records, right? So that records retention schedule it's Exhibit A. It's probably like the meat of the whole policy, right? You know, the general manager and the administrative service manager are gonna be the ones that apply this policy. But I think you just getting it into some format that we thought was pretty user friendly. Because if you look at others, God bless them, and I did, about a dozen, like they like reference the government code section, the CFR section and all. And I thought to myself, and we teamed on this, what does that matter? What does that matter to a Misty or to a frontline employee when they're trying to determine, is this record obsolete and ready for destruction? Why do they care about all those references over there? So we tried to make this very, very user friendly. You'll see that it's looking very much like your other documents. I was glad Monique passed this out that you approved in April, right? Keeping with the district's branding and keeping with their image, right? And making sure that they're resourceful to the employees, okay? It's gonna be in the same type format, it'll just be smaller like she talked about. So we start out by an overview, okay? And we showed you that. We definitely talked about, you know, why we got here, talking about the government code. And then if you notice, you'll see, I referenced on pages 55 through 57, and you've seen that not only in your personnel management, but your financial management policy, we provide definitions, right? So we want to make sure, is it all inclusive? No. Did we get input from staff? Yes, because some of them were like, what is that? What is that? I remember Kat telling me, what was the one, electronic birth or something? And we were like, okay, yeah, that is dumb. Let's take that out, right? And so we just make sure that there's some foundation, and even employees, when we train them, they understand, look, before you ask the question, go to the definition section. Go and try to learn for yourself and take that initiative to figure out, all right, there's something, or write in the margins. So the next time they update it, they've got another definition to add. You'll see the authority for this policy. It's on 58, page 58. We made sure that it was clear about what the employee duties and responsibilities are. And part of the task order for PCG is to do training. Monique and I have that scheduled tentatively for August 20th at a lunch and learn. And we will help them understand, because right now they probably all go, oh, thank God management has to take care of that. Thank God this is the general manager and the administrative services manager's duties. We're going to make sure that they understand that it is each and every employee's responsibility and duty for the data. And then the meat of this whole document starts on section 6 at the bottom of page 58 of the agenda packet. And this is just the guidelines for records retention. And again, you can see district council written all over this because God love them. They really had some good feedback in this. But this is the stuff, especially when you look at 59, section 6.1E. These are the documents the district will not destroy. I mean, it's just there, and then you'll see reference to some of those in the records retention, okay? Because they know the law, they're the ones who said, hey, it's in writing, it's very transparent for one of your ratepayers. So you can point to it, and if it's not, add it and make sure it gets in the next revision, right? The district council did a good job on that. Saying turn the page on 60, I'm hoping, I was really wishing Matt was here, but I know Lewis will appreciate the whole vital records. And I hope the rest of the board members appreciate it. And I know Kat does as the general manager because Monique did as, the former ASM. And that's, what do we need as a vital record for business continuity, right? And this is the place to put it, okay? So now you have it listed. You have it listed that number one, every record that we've identified as permanent, actually the law has identified as permanent, but we even, through staff involvement, we identified some records as permanent, okay? And that was based on their feedback, and we said, okay, you can make that decision. You can go more restrictive, just not less. But here's your vital records, here's your business continuity. It's a start, it's not a plan, but it's a start. And this is what we identified based on the years of experience, based on legal review and the staff input. Is there anything we're missing? Is there anything else that we couldn't run this business? You all couldn't run this business without these documents, okay? I know this subject is really boring. If you can't tell, I love this stuff. This woman loves this stuff. And, do we like doing indexing of files? Because we're not televised, I'm not gonna answer how I would answer, but you know what? It's a vital piece of the business, okay? And it's not just because we're a public agency. I'm sure law firms do it. I'm sure any, myriad of businesses understand how important it is to either have a really good librarian or a really good administrator for your business records. So we thought we covered everything, with regard to duplicate records, you'll see on page 61. Transitory records, meaning those stupid appointment things or when you get those conference invites, those are the kinds of things that you can destroy immediately. You don't have to hold on to. You'll see exceptions in the middle of page 61. Again, defined by law. This is when you don't, even if they are obsolete, you don't get rid of them. Is there active litigation? Is there a threat? Or is there one that could be a threat? Is there a court order? And this is the kind of guidance and the direction that staff needs so that Kat's not, going around saying, you guys can't get rid of that stuff. She can now point to this document. It's not her driving it or management driving it, it's the law, okay? And then we get through to the next page on 62, where it talks about where the records are stored. We thought it would be good just to put the different at the top of that page where records are stored, just so that it's fully transparent. They're not just all here at OCR. There are some at Dairy Lane, and there are a bunch at 1510 Folger, and then there could be some offsite locations. We didn't want to restrict the district to just these locations, so there could be others that are determined. And then you'll see that district council added that nice section about confidential records, okay? Again, to make sure that they're maintained in a way that, keeps their confidentiality in accordance with law. The records retention schedule in 6.7, we'll go through that when we get to that exhibit, but it is the district's exhibit A to this policy. And then the next section, in fact, let's go ahead and turn there to exhibit A. So that's on page 67. If you look how simple this is, you can see Tammy Rudolph written all over this, can't you? Because I know it drove Kat and Monique nuts that I didn't use Excel, right? Terrible, okay, Word. But that's why we love John Davidson, because John Davidson is going to reformat this and it's going to look very nice in that manual. But here is where staff provided some really good input with regard to what are your documents named? What are you working on now? I've been retired for a year and a half. What else can you see that's not on this list or should be on this list so that we make sure it's covered? So they're not asking the question of where does that go? We first broke it out into 4 sections. This first section is accounting and finance, customer services, and risk management. There's a myriad of ways that we could have created a schedule, and some of them especially cities, are voluminous. I mean, it means you don't ever want to touch your records management policy, right? You don't ever want to look at your retention schedule. So we tried to just really focus on the documents that we knew there was an abundance of, or that were used almost every day in the course of doing business here at the Mid-Peninsula Water District. And then we just red flag the ones that are permanent, just so that it's easy for staff to know, don't get rid of those. Okay, and we want to make it clear to them so they understand there's a reason, either by law or by a decision that was made by the team to keep those documents. The second section deals with, you can see the biggest section is the finance section, right? Because it covers risk management, utility billing, all the regulatory reporting, payroll, fixed assets, okay? Again, maybe not all inclusive right now at this point, but we think we hit the really high end items and the items that we know they're working with. Starting on page 70, you see administration, human resources, IT, information technology, the legal, and public relations and outreach. Again, we looked at other policies and said, how did they bunch those? How did they group those? And then we looked at the staff here at the district and said, how are they working within the confines of their duties? And that's how we came up with the topics and these different categories. And then we ran them by staff and said, hey, do they pass the smell test with you guys? Is there something we're missing? What are some of those forms that you guys use that we don't know what they're called? And then the next section was board of directors. So this is you all on page 72. And here are the things that happened because this district has a board of directors and what's involved. And you can see the permanent records, such as all board meeting agendas, packets, and official minutes. Those are permanent records of this district. So they should not be destroyed ever. And even if there's a paper copy, because we'll talk about the electronic versions here, you shouldn't get rid of them. They're permanent records. All the elections, information and materials, permanent. And all your legislation, and you'll hear from Monique later about the ordinances and the resolutions of this district. That's your legislative actions, and those are permanent records. Besides providing all that history, which, by the way, if none of you have ever gone through some of those minute books, there's quite some colorful history if you go back in those minute books, okay? But then you'll see the items, and depending on what's legal about, different records, you all as a board can say, well, we'd rather have this be a permanent record or this not be separation plus 10. If you look at board appointments, you want it longer. You can certainly make that recommendation as long as it exceeds that. It doesn't shorten that time period. Okay. And the last one was operations. Okay. A lot of sections or a lot of policies from other water districts. And I looked at more recent ones in the past couple of years. They added engineering since the district has a separate district engineer. Although this policy does apply, it does extend to your vendors and your consultants. Okay. So it means that whatever records, because they could also be served with a Public Records Act request, okay, as an extension of the district. And so they'll have to be educated as well about this and make sure that when, it's coordinated when they're getting rid of records, the district, at the time when the ASM or the Administrative Services Manager says, hey, it's time to get rid of all the records from year 2015 or whatever, district engineer, they've got to get rid of the records, okay? Because otherwise they're subject to any request that the district gets. So that encompasses your Exhibit A and your records retention schedule, okay? So go back now to page 63 and let's talk about destruction. No one wants to get rid of records, do they? We do. I mean, that is the one thing I will declare as an administrator. You want to get rid of records. It isn't just because you don't want to have them around, for litigation purposes or whatever. It's because they're voluminous and they take up a lot of space and they're gross, okay? Seriously. After going through the flood files in my last few months of employment here, I mean, the ruined records, the ones that got wet and damaged, those were disgusting, okay? I looked at all those other boxes out there and said the same thing. I went, why are we holding on to all those, okay? So there has to be some very legitimate way this district can get rid of records. And it's organized, right? So we created a certificate form. It's your Exhibit B, it's on the very back, okay? We took it from a couple of different forms and from the Secretary of State, and we just simplified it. So what this means is that in the future, and we'll talk about that at the end of this report, when records are destroyed here, you're going to see attached to the back of the general manager's report, her first one will be in September. You're going to see this form fully signed, and you're going to see the attachment of all the records that got destroyed. And guess what? Those are permanent records. And so I'm thinking, even as I was driving up here this morning, of talking to Kat about, John and I are here next month, talking about that website updates, then maybe there's a portal on the website where these go. So that there's full transparent information. No one ever asks you, why was that shred machine a 1510 Folger in July? Okay, well, you'll see the certificate and you'll see the records because there's nothing on here that's not public information. Okay, so we try to keep that simple. And so what'll happen is it gets initiated from the administrative services manager. These records are ready to be destroyed. And then the GM says, okay, are you ready to get it done? She oversees the process. Hopefully it won't be as big as this first one's going to be. And then the district council signs off on it. And then the records manager, the ASM who witnesses the destruction is the final signature. And then they hand that to the general manager. Okay, with the spreadsheet, which by the way, all those boxes are in a spreadsheet because that was created by Monday. Okay, so that's as simple as we could make it so that this doesn't get convoluted and no one wants to do it in the future. Okay. And then we put the procedures on the middle of page 63. Just use that schedule. If they're ready for destruction, use the form, route them for the signatures. After you get them, then do it. It can't be any easier. Method shredding, right? That most of the records are paper. And most shredding companies will destroy like CDs and discs and other various materials. And then we even added, and I think this is because of the financial management plan. I think that was you, Louis, that mentioned, what do you do when you lose a receipt? Or was that you, Brian? One of you mentioned that during the finance committee meeting, or maybe Kurt. Remember when you said, what do you do when you lose a receipt? Well, it made me trigger, what do we do if an employee accidentally loses a record or accidentally destroys one, because that's gonna happen. And so I looked it up and the Secretary of State and others had these, oh my gosh, these hideous bureaucratic forms. And so I just tried to simplify it and worked with Monique, and there's a process in here now, just in case that happens. And we even say in here, we're not attempting to try to malign an employee for doing it. We just want to make sure that it's properly reported out, right? And that you did the best you could to give the reasons why you did it and or how it happened so that it's recorded. And then finally, the section on electronic documents starts on page 64. So in the past, believe me, employees are just like, oh, let's go all electronic, let's go all electronic. And I heard about it during the financial management policy training out at operations. They were like, what do you mean you're gonna recommend Mylars? And I go, yeah, I am, because when you have an emergency and the computers are down for 3 days, like in the flood, you're gonna wish you had plans or as-built on Mylars and not on your tablets. But this now finally lawfully, legally allows this district staff to be working in an electronic world, okay? Instead of them doing it without authority to do it, okay? So that means some staff have taken signed copies and shredded them because they've got it scanned and sent, okay? District council really worked on this and gave the language that provided it because I said, this is their interest and this is what they want to do. The other thing is that we dealt with all the emails. Okay, and one of the issues that we have, and I'm sure we're not any different than any other public agency or business, the emails are just voluminous and everybody uses emails and, you know, something has to happen because at the end of an employment term, I was here 10.5 years, my emails are just sitting in archive. And there's public records and there are official documents in there because I didn't have time to file them. Well, this is going to require that emails are cleaned after 180 days, starting January 1st, because this shocked all the employees. They were like, whoa, wait. We don't want you deleting, having an auto delete on any of our emails. So we heard them. And we said, starting January 1st, after 180 days, your emails are getting wiped in all your accounts. So you better save them to the project file on the network drives that are backed up every night, or you better print it and put it in the file. Otherwise they're going bye-bye. Okay, and believe me, they're already starting to think about ways. I've already heard of some really clever ways they're trying to think about copying their email systems, all right? But the whole thing is because with your IT consultant, they have to buy more storage or there's got to be other equipment, whatever, to back all these emails up. And then even when we're gone, we created a procedure now for what a supervisor or manager can do to get access to that departing employee's emails, okay? And that was one other thing we added is that there are a lot of employees here who work off their laptops or their desktops and they store them on there. And so we made it a requirement because in every single records management policy I saw, every one of them said they must be on the network drive because that's what's backed up at night, not these individual laptops or these desktops, okay? And God love the operators, I do. You go out there, if you look at their desktops, and this is from a person who works on Word exclusively, pretty much. Every file they have, they've got a little icon in their desktop. That's their filing system. And so I'm going, guys, that's not backed up. Why isn't that in one of the myriad of drives? And then Kat had suggested OneDrive, so that got included in here, okay? So I mean, one of the things we talked about is just start over. Start over, don't spend the time on trying to organize all the electronic records. Start over, get an SOP in place and get people to follow it. So all the rest of the policy then, it ends with the policy review, which is every 4 years. And we think that was a legitimate, there were some that had 5 years, there were some that had 2, and we just picked one in the middle, okay? And one of the things too, we wanted to look at is just, we don't want all your policies coming due for review at the same time, right? Getting back to destruction, so we reported previously, Monique and that employee, they actually indexed 237 boxes. They're stored out at 1510 Folger. And there's about 50, as I recall, there's 48 or 49. I counted them when Michael took me out there a couple of months ago when I was here. And part of this task order that we have with the district is to get rid of all those boxes after you adopt this policy, okay? So Monique and I have worked in the past couple of days with a mobile shredding company. And they are gonna be available. We've got them on standby, basically, saying, let it get approved, and this will be your first batch of obsolete records that are destroyed. The 48 boxes or so, and then there's some out at Dairy Lane. We're gonna come back together in a couple of weeks. We're gonna add to that pile because we wanna just get rid of what you can get rid of now that you have a policy. And then we'll do a separate list of what remains as your permanent records. Okay, so, because that's gonna be way easier to look at, but on the back of that certificate that you get and with her GM report in September, you will see every file that is gonna get shredded. Okay, so that is going to happen hopefully in that 3rd week of July. That's what we're gonna shoot for now. And then finally, you'll get, we already told you about the manual. We already have staff training scheduled depending on the board's direction for August 20th, because I'm gonna be here for the personnel manual and doing some meeting for management with the bargaining unit on that project. And so we will train the staff on this policy manual too, so that they understand why and where it comes from, and Cat doesn't get barraged after it gets adopted by, good Lord, why are we having to do all these policies and why are we having to do all this work now, you know, so that they understand the reason for it in the background. So Monique, I was gonna turn it over to you to talk about those missing resolutions before we finish with our recommendations.
So one of the things I really wanted to do before I retire is make sure that all the minutes and resolutions and ordinances that were out at Dairy Lane in various boxes were brought back here. Because to me, those are really important documents. So they're all in the ASM's office, they're all in the file cabinet, and they're all indexed. And they're all there from 1929 to current, with the exception of 2 sets of records. One is the resolutions from 2014. I think it's resolution 1 to 33. We did have all of those scanned in, thankfully. Tammy had all of those posted on the website, so they are all electronically recorded. I think they're probably out there somewhere. But I have searched multiple times. I've gone out there I would say at least 10 times. And I've looked through the boxes multiple times. And I've just not been able to find, I feel like there's one binder with that year. That was like the next year. And wait, it's not 2014, it's 2021, I think. It was the.
Yeah,
resolutions from
2021.
2021, it's 1 to 33 from 2021. And I feel like that is the next binder that got started, or maybe they're in a file and didn't get put into a binder, but they're missing, they're somewhere.
You're missing
And then
one, it's a whole
The
year.
original ones are.
The wet signatures.
Of
Yeah,
1 year rezos.
And 1 year,
Yeah.
one whole year, for 2021.
from 2021.
This is just 3 years ago, basically, right? Wow.
There are only 33 resos for the whole year.
No, there was like 38 or 40, but the other ones are electronic.
We really feel like they're in those boxes, the flood file boxes. We really do. It's just that those, I use the word hurriedly put together, that they're not indexed, meaning they haven't been gone through. Okay, so I agree with her and Kat. I think they're out there. It's just that we don't have time to do all that, right? And indexing is the worst part of records management. It's the worst part about verifying what you've got in those boxes, so.
But the other items that I've discovered are also missing is original ordinances. Now, unfortunately, those are not scanned.
So these are the original ordinances from 1929 through 2014. So the ones in 2014, we have them electronically. I can't recall actually right now. I think I have it in the staff report. I can't recall if we have the actual, I think we do have the actual wet copies. So.
The
any-
scanned versions of
It says-
103 to 108.
yeah, so we have the scanned versions. But the originals that are, I'm sure they're in a binder because there's not that many of them. There's like 104. So they don't take up that much room, but I could not find them to save my life. So those two items are missing. Everything else is in their index. They're in their original containers. If you haven't seen the minute books, they are really cool. They're leather bound and they're pretty awesome. And the resolutions are all in binders. And those are also interesting, but anyway, that's the district's history. Those are their permanent records. And so they were just dear to me, so I made sure that they were here.
And that segues right into the recommendations, our final recommendations, the flood files that are there, there's gotta be permanent records. They've got little tiny labels, there's 98 boxes, Michael and I counted them. But we know there's more at Dairy Lane because we've seen them, and so those records were not part of this project. They've got to be indexed. I mean, and Kat knows what a huge project that is because they were put together in no wrong or fashion, meaning all the contract documents aren't in 1 or 2 boxes. They're in a bunch of different boxes, okay? And then, so we recommend that needs to be next and needs to be charged, especially once you adopt this policy. And then there should be some SOPs about the e-file system, or as I recommended to Kat, start over and do an SOP and just start over, seriously. And then just say archives. I mean, you archived all my emails and I know there's official documents in there. Okay, so why don't you mind archiving those records, right? And then last thing is the Mylars. I just think there are some old documents that Brent Chester told me about, old plans as built from this system that have historical value that he said they're getting to where we can't see them. Now, the district engineer has Mylars at his office of the projects that they've designed and they've built, okay? But it's easy to make this a deliverable of all construction projects that they give you a set of Mylars. And that operations team just rolls those puppies out and gets rid of all those paper copies that are damaged and destroyed and they get wet and now that you can hardly see them. But there are services that can bring those things back to life. They can, bring more ink to them and make them viable for them to carry into the future. So those are our final records recommendations for this policy. So that's it. And we're here to answer questions. It was a pleasure to work on this. And again, just a really good foundational policy document for the MPWD staff and team.
Great, thank you. Comments, questions?
So tell me, it says here, this is still a draft.
Yeah, it's a draft until you guys approve it. And then it'll be final and it'll be published into a book. You should get that next month at your board meeting when John's here.
And this was reviewed by the attorney as well.
Oh, yeah, they had a lot of input. It was good stuff too. I learned a lot, actually. So did Monique. It was good stuff.
The rules from, like you mentioned several times, this is legal, this is not legal. How frequently do those laws change?
Julie, I don't know.
I don't think they change very often.
I mean, it's the state's the one that drives it. Lewis, when I went out there and did some research about their voluminous records management policy, it's good stuff. But they take their time, usually every 3 to 4 years of reviewing their documents and how they're managing them, because they're a lot larger than this district's ever would be. And you'll see that the district council on page 66 wrote, at least once every 4 years, except as otherwise noted or as necessary when there are legal requirements. And that's really good language to have in here because something could come up. And Kat will know she's got to follow that, and then that she'll have to embrace or, and make sure that's included in the policy the next go around.
But I think we know universe of records. You know what I mean? Like, there's not gonna be new types of records at this point in our lives. And so those have been, they're all included in here in terms of, you know, what are the records you have to keep forever? You know, that you can't destroy. And then the Secretary of State guidelines are just guidelines that tell you, you know, if the government code doesn't say you have to keep these forever, these are permanent, then the Secretary of State guidelines are just like a best practice. And so you look at those and you decide, I mean, they all make sense. So unless you thought, well, you know, current year +7, oh, it's gotta be +9. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really a judgment call, but that guide is old. It's been around for a long
It was
time.
14 from 2014,
Yeah.
and Misty actually, or the supervisor, they actually recommended a couple of them that they thought should be permanent records, and we said, well, okay, we get that. Billing records of customers, we understand that, because there's a lot of customer history or property history, you know, that we thought should be kept longer.
The one thing I think that could change is electronic records. Like right now, there's no minimum retention period for email. It is a public record, but no one has said you have to keep those records for any particular amount of time, and agencies do different things. I always think less is better because I think of it as an attorney that has to do discovery and go through everything, and if it's not there, you have to do that. And you're not breaking the law, you know, you're complying with the law. But at this point, you could get rid of emails, you know, today, and that complies with the law.
Yeah.
You know, unless it falls into another category then where you have to retain it. So that could change, but you know, as we all know, the state, well, politicians generally are behind the times. So at this point, no one's telling anyone how long they have to keep that stuff for. But if there ever is an update, then we would update the policy.
Is there any normal policy for something like GIS data? Because that can change day to day. I mean, should you be
That's in here, right? Can't we?
archiving
Sure it is.
I think it's in here.
particular
We have SCADA.
generations of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's really living data that's,
Right.
it's kind of always
Yeah,
current.
GIS is superseded
Archives
plus
data.
10, superseded plus 10.
Superseded plus 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't guarantee that the software will hold up.
Yeah.
After 10 years, the new versions and.
Okay.
Lots of, when they store a lot of data on CDs and then CDs go bad.
Yeah.
And
The destruction policy isn't that you may destroy, but that you should, and
Should destroy.
basically must destroy.
Based on the schedule.
Okay. One question I had was unfunded grants. That I thought there might be useful information you might want to go back and steal from.
Yeah, so wasn't that 2 years, Brian? I think
Yeah.
kind of grants was 2 years. So definitely if that's the minimum, so if they wanted to keep it longer, they can keep that longer. And as she sees, if she's going through that, she says, oh, that should probably be kept for 5 years. Then, you know, she can keep it for 5 years and then make sure she updates the policy.
So if staff said, we didn't get this grant, we really want to keep this information. We'll just go ahead and keep it and we'll submit to the board at the next meeting to change the policy.
Yep.
Okay,
It's that flexible, which is nice. That's one thing that I think we can appreciate about it. Or if there's some documents that might get created or might have gotten missed this go around, they can add them.
Yeah.
And just, you know, we're gonna say, just write them in there, right? Because we're not gonna know and can't keep up with all that. Neither can the ASM. So,
well, it's the nice thing of having, you know, policies and these nice ballot manuals, like the
Yeah.
personnel manual also, like. That just lives on the shelf every time an issue comes up. Just write a note, add a, you know, post-it note, and then you know where, okay, these are all the changes you have to make next time to review it. Just track it that way.
On the actual resolution, under the fourth whereas. We have the 2024 to 2024 strategic plan.
okay, that was a typo we didn't catch. Thank you for that. What page,
That's
Kurt?
page 49.
49, thank you. Oh, I thought I could change that. That's 2024 to 2025. Thank you for catching that. I thought I I know district council caught it, I just obviously didn't, I'm pretty sure I did accept all, it just didn't catch that. I think she emailed me after she did it. And then, those resolutions that the district has existing from 2005, their destruction, resolutions for personnel records and contract documents, those will be superseded by this policy. Because they're incorporated in here, those particular, documents that are talked about on the retention schedule, so they'll no longer be.
I mean, doing this work, you have probably looked at other policies from other agencies, is that correct?
Yes,
Have you encountered situation where somebody told you that their policy was challenged in court because
No.
they destroyed something that they weren't supposed to, or they,
no. Mary over at Coastside is the most recent one locally that did theirs, and oh my goodness, I talked to her on the phone about it, I went, are you kidding me? Are you guys gonna be able to manage this? I mean, that's half the battle, right? Is making sure that it's user friendly enough that people here will want to use this. And she just said, oh, we hired a consultant, they did it, she was a longtime district clerk, and it was just best, and, but it's just so much, I could just see when I looked through theirs, cause I did. It was so big for a water district. I could see there could be like different categories that sounded the same. Like they might be under customer service and then they might have been under billing. And I'm like, which one does an employee go to? And could somebody litigate over that?
Hmm.
Is that time period different than the one you had in one section? So, but I have not heard of anybody ever litigating. Have you, Julie? I've never heard anybody litigating over a records management policy.
No, and I mean, anyone can sue you, right, for anything at any time. So with that caveat, we made sure it complies with the law, so. Let them try.
But Coastside was really happy to get rid of a bunch of records. That's one thing they were very happy to do. They had a public shred day and they got rid of a buttload of records. They said they were waiting for that policy to get adopted by their board so they could, because they just had a big warehouse full of records. And they were able to get rid of them finally. And most of your records in those 240 boxes are 20 years old. A lot of them are receipts, and I mean, I know you remember, Louis, that you and Matt, I reached out to you because she came to me. Because that's part of indexing, is having somebody that's knowledgeable or even question something that doesn't look right. Remember when I was asking you guys about old receipts from 15 or 20 years ago? I mean, only because she brought it to my attention, right? And you were like, oh yeah, I do think that Lillian traveled with me to that conference. Remember that? Matt had the same issue. So it's just making sure, you know, some of the files I remember that came in and they said, oh, we found a car title in one. I'm pretty sure if it wasn't here, we did it in Cambria. We found cash. We found cash in files. Okay. And what you're doing is you're just making sure that something you're looking for, like these resos and ordinances, that get stashed in the dump truck file or, you know, a project file. So it's labor intensive, but it's something that should not be done by an intern or a newbie. I'm telling you, it just takes work. And you just get in there and you just get it done. She's got a great, fabulous spreadsheet already set up, which is nice. So we'll leave that, you know, that'll be part of what is a legacy for this project. Of what you're looking for and how you do it.
yeah. So you were talking about the indexing. So anything that's destroyed is documented that
Yes,
document, that
Yes.
file was destroyed.
it's on a really nice spreadsheet. She's created. Yep.
So then if you're looking for something, you should go there to see, and if it's destroyed, then stop looking.
We
Stop
went through
wasting
all the questionable files. I can't remember whether 10 or 20 or a dozen maybe of boxes that I had to sit in there with them and go through because there were questions, which you'll have to do, right? You know, what do we do with this? Where does this go? How does this, is this? And, you know, she went through most of it, but there were just some that had to be questioned. So yes,
So
it isn't as easy as just going, oh, we looked into this though. We looked at options. So just scanning, you know, like making a recommendation, just scan all that stuff out there. I bet half those boxes, there's 98 that we counted, I bet half, if not 2/3, are fit within the retention schedule, need to be gone, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Really, so why do you wanna pay someone to scan? We already did the math and we're like, oh, that's expensive. It's expensive to just send those to a scanning service. And then, I'm sorry, when you send that to a scanning service, you have just lost that custody and control. And who knows what's in that folder, if they're even looking for the applicability of that file label, right? So again, labor intensive, but worth every minute when you guys get it done. This first part is just gonna be, we'll take a before and after picture for Cat to have. You'll see the before, what it looks like out there, 240 boxes, and then you're gonna see what it looks like afterwards with the permanent files.
And if you did get a public record request for a document that's been destroyed, you just give them the destruction. The proof that it doesn't exist anymore. Because we actually had that happen. We asked
And
another
the,
agency for records.
the indexing is going to be in the, I mean, it's
It'll be
going to be
updated.
something that's going to be accessible to.
Staff will
anybody,
have
probably.
that, staff will have that, yeah.
I mean, it's
We'll have it
a
in
public
this-
record.
Yeah, it's a public record,
Tammy mentioned potentially even having a portal on the website where
yeah.
we list a document on the website.
I think
Well,
every destroyed
So
document,
Any,
I think any
Policy
destroyed document
preparation,
should be
look
put
at
out on
it.
the website.
Yeah,
if they have time for that.
if that's what they're into.
I mean, you know,
But it
some,
also means it's.
some of the file
we all
labels
know.
don't make sense to me. Okay, did you see that list that you guys got when you had to destroy those flood file, those records that got destroyed in the flood? I mean, Liz and I had to make that executive decision to just go with the file label. Don't change an official record of this district, right? I didn't name them 20-19 easement. I didn't name that, but Liz and I were out there and I said, you put exactly what that file label says, because we're not recreating
Yeah, but
records.
that was also because when I saw it, my fear was that there could be something that has archival value, you know,
No.
or historical value to the district. And
I personally went
That
through
was-
all of that and I will tell you, I will attest. The things that I thought had archival value is losing the entire development of the MPWD Employee Association. And all the documents related to the purchase of dairy land. I thought those were and then some personnel files that she here recently needed and didn't have access to when an employee passed away a few months ago.
Mhm.
And that record doesn't exist anymore.
Mhm.
I hated that, but that's the reason why I said it's best that I do that, okay? Because I can say in court, I saw every page and I couldn't get pages pulled apart. You know, I think you were asking me, can't you save the records or draw them out? You can't, because a lot of them were onion skins. And they were molded already. I mean, by the time Liz and I got to them, but I personally made sure that I eyeballed them. I didn't just toss files because they were wet and gross. I had gloves on and a face mask on, as did Liz, and we went through those things. And they were ruined. So I feel bad about it. I do. And if we even thought there was some way to save them or draw them out, we did. We pushed them to the side and opened them up.
I have photos.
Some of those easement records, we did that too, because they weren't ruined. They're still gross, but they weren't ruined. It was a mess. It was unfortunate. But hopefully this will help resolve that, so that doesn't happen again. I know this isn't an easy policy, but you know, it was the easiest one to do because it's so legally driven. There's just not a whole lot. It's just that I know how elected officials don't like to get rid of records. They think there's something going on. I know we're gonna get some excitement over there when we're shredding next month with the company. What are you doing over here? What's going on? What's happening? I promise you, most of those records that she's got identified are old billing records and old receipts and old Form 1s from the maintenance staff when they went out and did work from 20 years ago.
Yeah, I would say it's primarily accounts receivable, accounts payable, billing.
It reminds me when some Russian diplomats in San Francisco were in hot water and their consulate on Green Street, which is still empty to this day. It's a beautiful building. There was smoke coming out from that building for a long time. There goes the records.
Oh, I guarantee you, since those records have been out there and outside of our chain of custody and control, hers and mine, they were shrink wrap. We'll be looking at every box. That's what we're doing in 2 weeks. We will not put those in front of the shredder until we're not going through every file, but we're gonna thumb through and make sure everything's in there as identified on the list. Because they were all shrink wrapped on purpose and they're not shrink wrapped anymore. Meaning either someone's gotten into them or the shrink wrap busted, because the shrink wrap's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that somebody didn't take a box and put it somewhere else and put another box back, okay? So that's the whole custodian of record thing here, right? It's boring work, it really
But I can't
is.
imagine why anybody would have gone to that.
We don't know why,
Yeah,
we don't know why,
baffling.
but they're there. And so, you know, we're going to make sure that it gets done correctly. And any of you are welcome to come out, we'll send a notice when we're doing it, and bring your shredding from home, okay? Cause we're gonna be there for day and a half, right? Wow.
Any other
And,
comments or questions?
The last one, is this is all budgeted like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're good on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing else from me.
I'm good.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for taking on a project that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, we all have to do it at our own personal homes, and that's still a lot when you're just getting rid of things and destroying them, but just taking the time. And I think when I looked at this, it's another testament to the longevity of the staff that we have here, because like you said, don't give this to an intern who's gonna have so many questions, but you could go to the staff and the staff could say, actually, you know, we should keep this because we've gotten these questions in the past or whatever. So I really appreciate
Yeah.
that you took the time to lead it, and that it's work that you both love, which is
Yeah.
great.
It's weird, it's weird, I know, but yeah.
And you know, that you included staff and that there is gonna be training for everyone. I think that that's a critical component, that it doesn't just, a policy that we approve and then it just goes like that, right? So I'm glad that the staff is gonna be trained on it, and I think that everybody's bought in since you've included them from the beginning, so I really appreciate all the effort that you both put into it.
Yeah, you're
So
welcome.
thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Great. I'm glad you also enjoyed it too.
Talk to me after the shredding, right? Talk to us after the.
Oh, I'm gonna
shredding.
be super thrilled.
Yeah,
then.
she's gonna be real.
It's gonna be great.
Oh, wait a minute now.
And we already-
You
all
were
these
having
staff
too
again.
much fun now,
Yeah,
come
no,
on.
the ops team will be out there, a couple of them will be out there, I've already reached out to Michael, going, we need a dumpster. Because they don't do the boxes. So can you imagine 240 file boxes, those bankers boxes? So those guys are gonna have to put the boxes at the truck. You know, it's the same thing you see at any shred day where they dump them in a tote and then they do it. And they're
Yeah.
gonna have to go to the recology and dump the recycling. They have a whole process, $4,052 for 240 boxes, which is cheap. I thought it was gonna be about 20 grand, to be honest, for on site. And then they have to break down those boxes. So the ops team guys will be out there to help us. So, because we gotta go through, anyway, it's definitely a labor of love. By the time, I was going, why did I bid on that work? When I did that second part, she goes, because we wanted to get it finished. I was like, okay, all right, here we go. We're gonna get into that part next. So it'll be nice to have it all accomplished, and we'll make sure that you have pictures so that she can show me. So
Yeah, you won't have to drag 240 boxes back and forth, back and forth.
No.
Great.
No, it will be awesome. Totally awesome.
Fantastic.
I'll
So
be
thank
very
you.
excited.
for the compliments.
No, appreciate it. Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to consider resolution 2024-11 approving and adopting revenue policy for the Mid-Peninsula Water District effective June 28, 2024.
Second,
Okay, and
We just need to make sure that the resolution gets updated with the dates.
Yes, that 25.
I have it in the motion.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Director Vella,
yes,
Director Wheeler,
yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Vice President Jordan.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank y'all.
Thank
you for having me again.
Thank
so much.
you, yay.
I will see you again next month too.
All right. On to item 8C, receive report on proposed Dairy Lane Operations Center modernization project cost breakdown.
Yes. So, this is our ongoing conversation about Dairy Lane. If you recall, the last time we went over this in depth was in March, when Nolan Tam presented, summary of reasons to remodel Dairy Lane over the other alternatives the drivers behind, the need to complete both Dairy Lane and Folger together. The, all the benefits, to the district with these projects when it's looked at as a whole. Background on identification of, the differences between the three design schemes that we presented to the Dairy Lane or to the board. And in why those schemes were chosen to be, analyzed. And then we spent some good time talking about the key trade-offs between schemes 1, 2, and 3. At the meeting, so scheme 3, which was basically leave the office building as its existing footprint, basically, and just remodel it. So that was decided that wasn't a really, that wasn't a strong option because it doesn't actually mitigate for future floods. It very minimally does. And board directed us to go dig further and present in further detail the differences in cost between schemes 1 and 2. So I'll hand it over to Tom and I'll let Tam here in a moment. It was 1 and 2. So scheme 1 is the recommended version, building the new 2-story building. Scheme 2 was building a 1-story building, and scheme 3 was building as is,
Just rehabilitating.
and expanding its footprint just a little bit, but and so, as Tom will go through, we worked, we looked at scheme 1 and we looked at scheme 2, and we just really, the further we looked at scheme 2 and all the reasons we discussed in the board meeting, we just can't recommend that the board go forward with scheme 2. It just has health hazards in the way it's set up. It's the biggest expenses in that approach aren't expenses that really add value to the district, and Tom will go into more detail on that. But in the end, it's just not going to be a good value for the district if you're spending money. So what we did focus most of the efforts on is identifying ways we can cut scope on scheme 1. To bring the cost down and comparable to the cost of scheme 2, because that was about 19 million for scheme 1, about 14 million for scheme 2. Well, we've gotten scheme 1 closer to scheme 2, and we'll talk about, those trade-offs. So I'll hand it over to Tom.
Thanks, Kat. I'm gonna share my screen. Please let me know when you can see this.
We see something. There you go. Or no, I don't see it
No, it's
now.
not yours.
Yeah, that's his.
Tom should share his screen. Yeah, that's not his. I thought he was sharing something else.
There it is.
There we go. We see it, Tom.
Great,
We
okay.
want
Full screen.
I think Tom.
Oh, Tom, you might want to hit full screen, Tom.
Yeah, it might throw it to another screen, unfortunately, when I do that. So I'll give it a try. Let's see. Yeah, it throws it to my other screen, but maybe I can share that one. Let's see.
Oh, Scott joined us too. Hi, Scott.
Evening.
All right, can you see this one?
Yes,
See it.
Great,
perfect.
okay. So we're gonna run through the first slides quickly. You've seen them before. They're from our previous presentation, but yeah, please stop me if there's something you want to focus on. Project goals, flood mitigation features, space allocation needs, kind of a reprise of the existing conditions. And here's scheme 1, the 2-story scheme, just to recap, 2-story building, some covered parking, rehabilitating the existing tarmac, new retaining wall on Highway 101 and some other improvements in the yard, seismic improvements in the warehouse. And then more detail of that. Building on the existing footprint, adding a little more to it. Developing a locker room, fitness room, some conditioned storage in the warehouse. Second floor with training room, kitchen, and a deck. And then scheme 2 was trying to fit everything on, basically on one floor. So new building addition, but putting some of the administrative uses kind of into the warehouse because, that with no second floor, we still want to find room for training, kitchen, administrative offices, new restrooms. So as Kat mentioned, putting these pieces into the warehouse really, I think, hobbles the use of the warehouse in the short and long term, and requires staff to kind of go through the warehouse to get to the training room or to the staff areas. It also means that we have to put holes in the existing tilt-up construction to meet light and air requirements for the building code, and that's problematic. It's expensive. It's possible, but it's really not recommended because it it kind of penetrates or kind of destroys the structural efficacy of the tilt-up panels. You can work around it, but it's not a good solution. So for that and other reasons, it's really kind of a non-starter. It separates the staff uses, again, uses large pieces of the warehouse, potential life safety issues with people kind of going back and forth from the warehouse to get to administrative areas. The quality of those spaces is not very nice. Their access to light and air is restricted. And I think most importantly, it doesn't fundamentally meet one of your goals, which is, supporting the district for the next 75 years. It builds, for the short term, but really kind of puts a plug in the warehouse a little bit. So for those reasons, we're recommending that this is not something to pursue. So from that, we started to look at possible cost reductions for.
Add, so one thing that happened with the break-in we had recently, so if you recall, in order to fit all this extra stuff in the shop, we currently have 3 roll-up garage door access points. And we are gonna propose to remove 2 of those roll-up doors. Well, what happened in the break-in is we had, someone drive through and damage 1 roll-up door. That would be the 1 remaining roll-up door. So if we had the same scenario happen with that, scheme 2, we would no longer have a securable roll-up door to, the building. We'd have no way to drive a car in and out, or if we did, we just couldn't secure it because, right now we're waiting for the door to be repaired. Doors on order is always, it'd be months out. And the other thing is, we're looking at the world, we're looking at the specific plans to redevelop the HIA. We're looking at the reality that, the industrial area around here is going away. These auto body shops, mom and pop shops, are all going away, and we don't know where those services will come from in the future. I mean, right now we're moving away from doing our own auto repair, and, metal fabrication and all those things that the district really used to do a lot of in-house. Well, what happens if those services aren't actually in the area in the future and we have to do them in house, and we don't have the space, and so now we're trying to find more shop space somewhere after all of this area has gone, right? So those are 2 major ways that this scheme really doesn't prepare us to be flexible for the future in real significant ways that can impact the district's ability to do our jobs, to maintain our vehicles, to have our vehicles, to, manage the equipment and, have space to work on meters and everything that we do need to do our jobs.
I just wanted to add that little bit there.
All right, so scheme one, potential reductions. Recall that the project cost, including soft costs, was about 19 million with a 14.5 million construction estimate. So this slide represents, not pencil sharpening, but really kind of drastic scope reductions. Omitting the fitness room in the warehouse, omit the conditioned storage, reduce the EV charging stations, reduce the covered site canopies, omit the photovoltaics, reduce corporation scope by 25%, and that could be no bulk storage or spoils or new pipe storage. Omit the second floor training room and the associated deck out kind of in front of it, and use the boardroom for the training facility. Reduce admin square footage by about 10%. So, taking all these reductions and then squeezing the administrative 2-story by another 180 square feet, whether that's, pulling a restroom out or reducing office space or other means. And then the last one is, reduce the corporation yard work scope by additional 50%. So I think we're thinking of the corporation yard work, which is about $3.5 or more million in the cost estimate, kind of low-hanging fruit that we can potentially cut a lot of the work and that could be done later. I think the only essential items, and we'll talk about those in a minute, is maybe the retaining wall and some other stormwater management, the sewer lateral, a few other things, but leave everything else off the table. So taking all those reductions, we're below 10 million with a project cost of about 12. And we're assuming you don't want to take all of them, but if this is just a snapshot of what could be achieved. So any questions about this?
First, I just want to point out things like the reduction in number of EV charging stations and, omitting all PV. That this is a good paper exercise. The reality is there are funds out there, grant funds, that could, rather than eliminate from the scope, offset those costs from the scope. So, they're included here, but of course, the discussion is what do you want to include or not include? And then also the items indicated with an asterisk are things that we could certainly do later as a phase 2, as at a date, at a later date. That don't have, they're not a part of, integral part of the project, like, the floor deck, right? It's hard to just, add an extra room and a deck later, but it's easier to add, some extra conditioned storage space in the warehouse.
Okay, moving on. The next slides just illustrate these concepts graphically. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, conditioned storage, that's air conditioned storage?
That's right. Heated and
Yes.
air conditioning.
Okay. That's it.
All right, so just explanations of the things we just went through. So reduce the EV charging stations, omit the kind of exercise room, and we had 2 levels of storage there. And then, scope reductions in the corporation yard, omit the training room and the deck out in front of it. And then kind of just 3-dimensional views of what that would mean, cutting out the covered parking canopies. And then omitting the training room on the second floor, the deck associated with it, and again, the conditioned storage and exercise rooms. So then we looked at what were the essential pieces that we thought really needed to, if we did nothing else, what would we have to do? And that is, remodel the existing administration building as is, not raising it, but just, repairing it and rehabbing it, new systems, but really minimal new structure. Upgrade the warehouse seismically, a new warehouse roof, retaining wall repair along Highway 101, new sewer lateral, some stormwater control. A new van accessible parking space and making sure the accessible path of travel is up to current code, and an EV charger for that space. And then, basic flood control, at the openings as best we can. So, that total is about 3 million, a project cost of 4 million. I think my gut tells me that's probably still a little bit low, but that's according to our cost estimate.
That's estimates, to just put things back the way they are, plus all the required kind of code updates that we would need to do.
So, moving on to the next one, just a cost comparison here from various projects. And I think the main illustration here is, the costs that we're seeing in our estimate really are kind of conforming to similar projects between $900 and $1,000 a square foot. And each of these projects has their own flavor of site and landscape and other upgrades. But essentially, the bid results and estimates are coming into the 900, 1,000 square foot range. If there's a project with a laboratory or a commercial kitchen, then those costs are a little higher. But I think the main purpose here is, our estimate is not at all out of the ballpark compared to other recent projects.
Well, and the other takeaway that I have is, we're not the only ones doing these projects. We're kind of here in the Bay Area, we're all developed in generally the same time period. All of our buildings are getting old and having issues and needing seismic upgrades. Every time I talk to another agency, it's, like I was at the tier 2 meeting, I was talking to Hayward, and City of Hayward's like, oh yeah, our wastewater admin building, we have to rebuild that. That's a $34 million project, right? This is not a unique issue. Customers are seeing it in their rates as well. Other agencies, like, we're all having to deal with it. It's just the reality of where we are in time.
And I think that's really, that's pretty much it for us. Then we go through kind of a reprise of the entitlement process that we'll have to go through, and, milestones. Essentially, we're just moving things out a year, assuming you start again with design in a few months, November 2024, and could be move in about July 2027. That is, I think, the end of our presentation. So I was going to stop sharing, but are there any slides anyone would want to go back to?
I had a question about the reduction for the training room and the deck.
Mhm.
The underlying first floor is still going to be there, correct?
Yeah.
So essentially, we're going to build a roof there instead of the training room?
That's right.
Yeah.
And, once we're eliminating that training room, we might reconfigure the floor plan a little bit, so it doesn't quite look like somebody took a bite out of it, that it's a little more kind of coherent.
Yeah.
Felt a little,
yeah, no, it was mostly just a graphic illustration of we would be losing this much square feet. We would revisit the floor plan and kind of, make it rational. But you got that right. Those spaces would go away.
The costs at this kind of higher conceptual level are all like on a square footage basis, right? So
Right. It just seemed like just getting rid of a piece of wall and roof was going to be fairly. These are looking like almost $1 million to make that change.
That's
It
right.
seemed a bit.
Yeah, well, that's all the electrical you have to run through, it's all the materials, it's all the plumbing, it's all the planning, it's,
Well, there's no plumbing in that. It's basically deck and a room with glass.
air conditioning, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, again, when you're doing conceptual level early cost estimates, like it's,
Mm.
they're all. They're all rough costs and they get refined as you make your decisions down the design process, like any project.
Well, how often is the boardroom used? Other than for board meetings?
So, and that was, you know, when we talked about where we cut the training room was the first place I said, you know, we can cut it. It sure would be nice to have that multifunctional room that opens up to the kitchen and all of that, but we've always, this is our training room. This boardroom here is our training room,
Yeah.
or the shop, and before the flood, the boardroom was our training room.
Our
So
safety meetings, we have
that's an easy.
twice a month safety meetings, we all get together there because the room large enough for everybody to get in together.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I asked the question because it's, and thank you for kind of paring down the budget a little bit, but it's still a lot of money. And so I'm looking at where we can cut costs, because later on, when we're looking at the budget and the percentage of increase that we're gonna be doing over 10 years, even though I think it's small per household, it's still a lot. So, that was my question about that, but anybody else, I have other questions, but you guys, anybody else?
Yeah, looking at this. Potential reductions, I guess my inclination is all of them. But I guess I'd like to hear if there's anything on here that is really bad blood. By taking it out.
I'm surprised you want to take out the PV.
I don't want to take out the PV, but I do know that there's ways to get that type of stuff. So,
You know, those are the types of things where. If they aren't needed in the first 5 years, they can be added afterwards, type of thing. That may be the type of thing that they're gonna grant for, or
Yeah.
that could be where developer fees. Get put in type of thing, because they're one-offs. As opposed to long-term capital, but. You know,
Yeah, no, I was with you. I was like, oh, this is much more palatable number.
So in terms of what would hurt, I think the fitness room might hurt from an employee perspective a little bit. I don't think it's insurmountable, but I do think they would, you know, that would be unfortunate. The courtyard scope, I would think some of these upgrades we definitely want to do in the future. I think we'd want to figure out how to work them in. Improvements later, of course, every time you push off an improvement, you'll pay more for it later. It's less efficient to do it as an individual standalone project. But I think, and I think someone will definitely will want to do, and we talked about a little bit, you know, some of the courtyard work is potentially, you know, repaving, and well, we don't want to like say, okay, we're gonna take on the project ourselves, well, things like repaving, like, well, we know how to do that, maybe we do that small piece in-house. And get a little bit creative, pipe storage rack, maybe we do that ourselves, right? And we can take it out of this project, but do it later. So I'd say of all, you know, what hurts the most, and Rena and Monique, let me know if you disagree, but I think what hurts the most would be the fitness room. And that's just because you know, the employees would very much like that. And it does have that kind of, that workers' comp benefit as well. But the others, I think we can manage.
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, what's nice though is again, we're looking at building a nice locker room for the folks there, because you've seen the locker they have out there in the garage, and you know, in the morning when I'm out there, they're just all men right now. And some of them will get down to their skivvies, well, to put on their work clothes, and you don't want to have that in the future when we have both genders working out there. So it is gonna be nice if we proceed at some point in time with a project that we at least have some decent locker space for the employees. But the fitness room, I think, is an extra. It's not necessary, but it'd be nice to have, it's not necessary.
I also thought that at our last meeting, that President Zuka had a lot of good comments, based on his experience. So I don't know if there's a chance for him to get a shot at this. It might be worthwhile.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate that he could make it today. And it just to kind of back up, so the board isn't asked to make a specific decision specifically on this data, right? It's more information.
We're just receiving a report, right?
Yeah, and but it feeds, of course, into the discussion, the next discussion of the CIP, which is a part of, and the implication on a rate. And then if you call later in the meeting, the goal is to schedule another study session to focus on rates, to get some guidance from all of the information you're hearing today, right? And direct the discussion at the rate study session to get us closer. And so certainly I'm happy to meet with President Azuka and go over this individually and get that same feedback, given that he couldn't be here tonight, but.
And there's no planning commission hearing on this one?
So in talking to Carlos, because there's no change in use, the only thing that would trigger a planning commission hearing would be that kind of early concept we had of if we wanted extra office space, we could put it on top of the storage bins. But we, that's not in this current plan, so it would all be under Carlos's approval authority.
Yeah.
For this project.
Yeah.
Well, there's a different story.
Do we wanna,
All I can say is that, when you get to a situation like this, you only have like one chance to do it right. And sure, we don't have, infinite money, but you don't wanna go back, 5 years from now and go like, why didn't we do that? Why didn't we increase that? That's the thing that I'm struggling with because these opportunities do not present themselves every year. Just once in a career that this happens, It's unfortunate that it costs so much money. I mean, because, I'd love to have a Cadillac there, that's gonna serve us for the next 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, the fitness room and the conditioned space in the warehouse are items that they're listing as potential add-ons later because they don't require a lot of structural work, basically interior and if we're planning on it and add on later, we could make sure that some of the utilities in the building are appropriate.
And as we move through, the design process, we'd identify what of these we want to do some design work now on. And, sometimes, and I think North Marin example, right? I think they've fully designed their phase 2 parts of the project, even though it's not gonna be implemented like until later. So we could take a similar approach, which gives us some, cost efficiencies.
Some breathing around here.
Yeah. May not be the Cadillac, but I think what we have here is pretty good. Not a hoopty.
Yeah.
But I will say that, this, I really feel like this is the right approach, doing scheme 2. We'd be spending a lot of money on workarounds rather than improvements. And I just don't feel good about spending that kind of money for workarounds.
Yeah. And I don't think we'd be happy if we just did a $3 million retro on the existing building. Because then we have all of the problems that we had before and we aren't building for the future, we're just band-aiding the existing building, and we have all the ongoing problems.
Cramming staff that already were kind of crammed together back in, staff that does more and more computer work.
Right.
All on top of each other. It can be done, but it's not, if we have the opportunity, which I think we do. It's better in the future.
So with scheme 1 without the workout room, does it have a place for people to change?
It would have a locker room,
It has
locker room, the shower rooms, yeah.
Yeah, so we're taking some shop space,
but minimal shop space, and part of that is the locker room area.
So I don't know if we want to go around and say where we're inclined.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I think we can, you know, I don't know, if this is our fourth or fifth meeting about this. It is unfortunate that President Zupas not here because he really had a lot of good feedback, but I think we could all kind of talk about where we are. And then, maybe Kat, you could speak with Matt. And then we can kind of go from there for what the next steps would be. Yeah. Okay.
So I'd say all the reductions, I'm up in the air about the fitness room. I could go either way on that.
What kind of money on the fitness room are we?
They have it down.
$258,000 approximately,
$150,000?
$260,000, safety.
Same thing if you're doing your own house, improvements to your own house, that adds
No,
up
I
real
know.
quick and
Trust me, I know.
yeah.
It is 500 square feet.
It's 500 square feet, yeah.
Room.
Not a big fitness room though. 500 square feet.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
So it's 26 by 20.
I mean, that's a lot of fitness room for small staff. It's really crushing. Yeah.
I guess because I do not like going to gyms and hotels that are so small.
Right.
So I'd say do it with the fitness room then? Just only $250,000.
And, you know, I've said it before, but the goal, of course, through this whole process will be to minimize cost, and
Cool, yeah.
we have planning numbers, but nobody's trying to build gold-plated water district office.
We'll go with that.
Well, we can change the plan and put a one-story boardroom in, then you'd have additional floor space above it.
Well, Tom and the, well, certainly need to explore, I mean, we'll explore all configurations, but, I don't know. In looking at the comment.
So the issue here now is basically whether to include the fitness room or not.
Well, that's just me. I mean, I've yet to hear from you all, from you, Louis. What do you think?
I want everything. So. Yeah, I could go with that, I suppose.
And I will add, I mean, I at least am mentally making the assumption, I think you are too, that we can get funding sources to do the PV. I wanna do a microgrid, we have a really big generator out there, fortunately, that we wanna integrate. And we've talked to, actually now I've talked to 3 different companies that do the planning and design and the, you know, grant work for that. And so they're out there, the support's out there. It's, you know, I think we can, you know, for our cost estimation purposes, take the cost out, but actual scope, I do think that's one of the more important features for just resiliency and planning. And if we have a major outage and for, you know, weeks or months at a time, which could conceivably happen. We'd have power. We'd have other problems, but we'd have power.
So your perspective is the same as Brian's, or?
Yeah, I was gonna just add the same, but add the exercise, but I suppose if we plan for it and do it later, I can go for that too.
I think there's certainly an advantage in keeping the cost as low as we can. I think we sort of probably need some sketches of what this would look like give a little more detail and some alternatives as far as what the phasing might be for those types of things. I don't know, I sort of like the 400 square foot addition to the building footprint, but, you know, it's like, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's hard to tell what the actual, some of this is sort of. We're just cutting this particular item by 10%, we're cutting this particular item by 40% and so on. So it's. We've got a target we're trying to get to, and until we get more detail, it's hard to tell exactly how it will work. But I certainly, you know, like the idea of cutting $10 million off of the project.
Yeah.
At this point in time.
Yeah, I feel the same. I honestly, I looked at the reductions as this is a good first starting point. Just because from our last meeting and the amount of increases we're gonna have to do with rates troubles me. So it troubles me because, you know, we're doing this, we're doing Folger, you know, we have to increase rates because we have to, we still have to make sure the pipes are still working. So I saw this as like the first pass. I'm gonna be honest, like, oh, this is great. Let's see where else we can shave from here. So I think, you know, as much as I would love to say, let's do it all. And I hear you, Louis. You know, 5 years from now, we might be saying, gosh, I wish we did it, but you know, but we have to work with what we have now. You know, and I just am concerned, and I think I'll feel better once we figure out the rates and what we're gonna do there. To be able to say, okay, then I'm comfortable spending X amount of dollars doing this. But right now, when we get further down in the agenda, and some of our rate increases are like 20%, 25%. And it doesn't stop, I mean, it gets smaller, but so when I look at this, I look at it purely from a budget perspective, like what can we do? To plan for the future, but also do it in the most cost-effective way. And you know, it's great. Maybe they have like some fitness grants or something, you know, like, you know, the San Mateo County declared, you know, like mental health an issue. And I would argue that having a fitness room is good for, you know, not just physically good for our employees, but also their mental health, right? That they need that. So, I mean, if we can find creative ways to try to get some additional funds, and I know you're meeting with Senator Becker, and I actually saw Supervisor Corzo, so she said we need to get with her office. And, you know, I'll see Kevin Mullen in a couple weeks and maybe ask him for some money, but anyway, so I say, yeah, unfortunately, like, I think we need to like look at cutting all of this and reconfigure things and try to figure out how we can, you know, maybe still create something that's really beautiful and a nice space for the employees, but also be very cautious with the budget.
And just to give you an update, I'm still working with Senator Becker's office. I had a call with them last week. And what we are attempting to do, and Senator Becker is working to do, he's part of the work group developing the climate resiliency bond. And so he now has talking points for our project, and it's actually both the Folger and Dairy Lane, the full, and, you know, working with the $25 million number, because that was our initial planning number, so that's what we're going with. And so we gave him line item language, so he's trying to get this project written into the climate bond. Obviously, don't know if it'll be successful, but that is what we're attempting to do. Also, I was at the CSA GM Summit, and I was talking with their legal affairs person, who said, you should absolutely be able to get funding for these projects. You have a great story. Why are you bothering the state representatives? Let's put you in front of the federal representative. So I'm going to work with them to set up meetings with our federal reps and see if we can pursue that. There's other, you know,
grant funding that now have recommendations for 2 good grant writing firms that I got in the last week. So I'm gonna be sending out, I'm gonna try to get, I mean, this is part of the latest discussion is we absolutely need to try to fill, as many of these gaps with alternative funding sources as we can, but we can't plan on it until we have such.
That's when we did that walkthrough with the Office of Pappin, Dan Pappin. We talked about extending this for community use, for portion of it of community use. Did we do any more exploring on that? Could be available for the community so that maybe there's some kind of other funding, since we are, providing maybe a meeting room, an activity room
We
extended to the community as well.
We haven't, done anything specifically on that, where that comes into, like, if we get a good grant firm who can identify, like, okay, here are the grant options, you can alter your project or, add some features to your project or whatever to meet this grant, then we'll absolutely do that. It's just, there's so many different grant programs out there, you look at the list of the websites, like, you need someone who's dedicated to that, so we haven't been able to go that far yet. I can tell you one aspect that really resonated with the senator was the fact that we are located here in the middle of the peninsula. And that we have 11 emergency interties, soon to be 12 emergency interties with our neighbors. We can be viewed as really an integral part of the whole water system on the peninsula, and that has a lot of value to make sure that, in a major event, we have all the facilities we need functioning because of that regional benefit.
And then we can have the exercise room as well.
And I also pointed out that, the sooner we get funding for these projects, the sooner we can complete other projects, such as providing water to the hospital or having redundancy and the ability to provide water to the hospital. That's also the talking points for Senator Becker, and for any other legislators, like, this is the reality. We only, and this is, people look at kind of, and I keep saying it myself, free money, grants and earmarks is free money, but really it's taking taxpayer dollars and bringing it back to the community. Because
This reminds me of the project that I was involved with many years ago, which was the construction of a fire station in Redwood City, 3-story. And we budgeted a lot of money, which I was accused that it was just going down the drain because I put a section of the second floor, which is the living quarters for female firefighters, and at the time, it was unheard of. And it was not even 4 years later that we hired our first females, and now we have female firefighters who are captains and battalion chiefs and all of that. And you go back and if we didn't do that, it would have cost us 10 times as much to separate, to have female firefighters, to have a little private area for them, And somehow this comes back and haunts me, and we're like, what if we don't do this? And then, 10 years from now, we'll go like, why didn't we do that, so. Anyways, but
or we delay it and we have another event.
okay. We don't have the money.
Okay. So are you good with the direction?
Yeah.
From the board, and you'll talk to President Zuka?
That's helpful, yeah.
Okay. All right. On to item D, receive report on proposed 5-year CIP budget and corresponding potential customer rate scenarios.
Juven, that side of the UPS is dead,
Okay.
so it has to be plugged into this side.
Well, you can't, because there's not enough.
Or you can grab, there's another surge protector out there that should be plugged in.
Okay, so. You'll see you have a revised, portion of the packet in front of you, added a couple extra slides, to the presentation since you saw it, or since it was printed, on Monday. And also, there was in the CIP, tables, the bottom line wasn't summing correctly. So just a couple revisions, so. This, of course, is a continuation of the discussion of the 5-year CIP budget, and how it impacts rates. So again, some of these slides you've seen before. I'll go through them fairly quickly. You know, the summary of the recent, but it's nice to include it all, just like kind of for completeness and, telling the story when we go back and look at, how and why decisions were made. Summary of the recent rate increases, followed by the last 5-year rate study and what was decided there. And I'll point out that in that study, over the 5 years, it was a 49% increase that was included and approved there. And then also happened to find the earlier 5-year rate study from 2010. And so I just included that for completeness. And again, over a 5-year period, that was a 54% increase approved.
Can I jump in just real quick on the capital? Can we go back to slide, excuse me, slide 102? Yeah, so a question came up at the last board meeting, just a philosophical question or just a general question as far as the capital, the projects that are listed here. Are they mission critical? Are we in risk of the tank rolling down the hill? What are the risks, right? And so I wanted to just take a few minutes to kind of talk about the capital as more of a looking at it holistically. And the best answer I can give is that we're not in any imminent danger of something blowing up, unless you could tell me when the next earthquake is, right? So we're operating the main tank project there, the Decoven tank replacement. It's a big number. I think it's six. Let's see, where is it at? $7 million or even more, $8 million. So right now we're operating that tank in a manner where it's seismically stable, right? So if an earthquake happens right now, we're operating the levels of the tank and lower, much lower than, about half of the tank is only being utilized because it's in danger of failing. And the inside coating and all the metal is exposed and we're not fixing it because we're in the process of replacing it, right? So for the past 5 years, we haven't touched it up. We haven't, because it's sort of like, well, you're going to tear down the house. Why repaint it, and fix the metal? So we could probably get another year or two out of that tank if we needed to, maybe push it for 3 years. But at some point, the metal, we're going to lose the metal, right? Because it's water against the coating inside that tank that failed. But as far as it rolling down the hill, I think that was a great visual that President Suka used. We're mitigating for that. But you're a fire person, we don't have water, right? Like, so we're losing storage, which is not good after an earthquake. After an earthquake or seismic event, or even in a regular fire, you want that storage. So right now we have these 2 massive tanks and we don't have the storage. So, and then just try to wrap your heads around, anytime we delay the capital, it's not just that one project, right? Every project behind it, we're just pushing everything down. So yes, we're pushing this. If we decide to push the tank 1 year or 2 years, that's fine. That project gets pushed, but then everything behind it gets pushed, right? So just, I don't have answers. You guys have the tough job. I just wanted to kind of give you, that sort of that look. And I'm sure you guys are aware of that. And every time we push that back, it gets more expensive. And then the other big ticket item on this is the 101 crossing at Pamp. and that's pretty much designed. And what that project does is it takes out AC is a very brittle water main that right now is sitting underneath 280. And we have no idea what that condition is. There's a crossing currently, and that new crossing will let us abandon the crossing that is currently under 101, right at Dairy Lane. So it crosses right underneath Dairy Lane to Shoalway. And it also,
101, not 280.
I'm sorry, did I say 280?
Yeah.
I'm
So
so
that-
sorry. I'm sorry, let's start over.
I-
You know what, the funny thing is, Carissima is doing a project very similar to this on 280. So my mind was somewhere else, I apologize for that.
That's okay.
101, yeah, so 101,
We're listening.
and, yeah, I appreciate it, it was actually a quiz, you know, so. And then as Kat said, it provides a little bit more redundancy to the hospital, that's there now. So those are the two big ticket items on this, you know, and the reasons behind it. Again, that project, I don't know what the condition of that pipe is. I don't know what the condition of that AC pipe is. It's functioning now. It could function for another 10, 15 years, but it's certainly under risk for a seismic event. So when I ask you when the next earthquake is gonna be, it could be another 15 years and it could function fine.
It's at Dairy Lane.
It crosses on the side of Dairy Lane. It's at the property line between Dairy Lane and the mobile park.
Right.
And then it crosses underneath there all the way to
The
shore.
pole line is the utility easement, that's where that water line is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
But it's
earthquake
not-
aside though, is there a way how you can
We can.
determine?
We can non-destructively test it by spending money to see what condition that pipe is. But it'll give us the condition of the pipe, Louis. We know that pipe is at risk at a seismic event. So
Correct.
it will tell us that the pipe itself, if there is no earthquake, can last another 20 years.
Correct, yeah,
But-
that's all you can do.
But so it'll tell us the cement content that's left in the AC. We won't use the full name, it makes people nervous. And then it'll tell us that pipe can last another 20 years. But not in a seismic event, it'll just be under normal
Yeah,
conditions.
because even seismic events depend on at what level, you know?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if it's gonna be an 8.0, you know.
So that
Chances are it will not be
structural
there anymore.
It has a steel sleeve that was put in, but I don't know the condition of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not cathodically protected.
Right.
And it's in a it's in a tidal influenced area. So most likely parts of it have already failed. We can certainly so we can spend money and try to prolong the life of this, which is something that I think came up at the last board meeting. But irregardless of that, it's gonna fail at a seismic event. And so it's not imminently in danger. I wanted to make sure the board understood that, but it's something that we need to consider as we move down. Those are the two big high-risk concerns that I certainly have as your district engineer because of the reduction in water supply on the tanks
So did the COVID.
and then taking out 101. Right, like that, I don't think any of us want to do that, so. So I'm sorry, I wanted to just before we jump into this, I wanted to give you. Thank you.
Wasn't there a scheduling issue regarding the PAMP line to coordinate with something?
It was, and that sewer project, there was a big sewer project being
Right.
done on Shoreway, that's complete now.
Okay,
So we're now,
we were waiting for that.
we were, yeah, so
Okay.
we were able to phase it, we actually got the PAMP portion in.
Uh-huh.
So we have a pipe to a dead end to a pit on the PAMP property. Because we're at a risk of, if we didn't put that in, we'd lose the easement.
Right.
So we had to put it in.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Cuba, that was really helpful. Want to go to slide 6 of the presentation, I think it's 108
Wait,
total. So there were some questions more, about where our rates stand in the greater context of the Bay Area, so we did a little extra analysis. This slide here, so Drew helped me crunch some of these numbers using, trying to get apples to apples, right? So what this is looking at is, this looks at each individual agency's average water use as reported in the Bosque Annual Survey from 2023. And then, with a lot of digging and research, found everyone's posted or adopted rates as of this July. And calculated where the average monthly single-family residential bill is. And Palo Alto isn't included on here because there was obviously something funky in what was reported in the annual report. And then, and so you can see, you know, that's where we fall. And it's, you know, similar to where we've fallen, you know, other looks at the same data. Yeah, Brian, you might want to use the new packet that I provided. Some of the slides that we added since.
Okay.
I didn't want to hold up the packet, so finish this analysis. And then the next slide shows going back to the 2019 annual survey. How much the average monthly bill for single family residential for 2019, how much it's increased for each agency from then through the July 1 rates. And you can see, you know, we've increased our rates, and this has just been the SFPC pass-throughs, 9% in that period. And other agencies have increased much more. I will point out that you certainly in some of these agencies had rate restructuring, other things that, you know, certainly don't come out in this kind of analysis, but I'm imagining that's why, you know, some of these appear to have reduced their rates, really more of a restructuring that resulted in the comparison being lower. So just to give that context of what our neighbors are doing. And then the next slide is that same analysis, but showing the change in rates from 2022 through the adopted July 1 rates. And again, you can see in that recent time frame, again, other agencies have raised their rates more significantly than we have in that time period. Next slide you've seen before, that just shows that, you know, if we don't raise rates at all at some point in the very near future, our you know, expenses, even regardless of capital investment, will exceed our current rates. The next slide is that very initial first pass, this 5-year CIP that you saw before. So again, just for completeness, this is kind of where we started in this process, as well as the graph that reflects it. And then our first pass at, you know, figuring out a rate increase structure that would meet that total, you know, $56.5 million CIP investment over the next 5 years. Just to kind of refresh on this graph, the solid green line, that is our, you know, balance of all of our reserve funds. The top blue dashed line is the total district reserve target. That includes the $8 million capital reserve, the operating reserve of about half of our, you know, 6 months of operating expenses, and our $1.2 million rate stabilization reserve as well. And then the red dashed line, that's just our operating expense reserve at 6 months operating expenses. So the goal, of course, is to keep our green line within that bracket. We don't want to go too far below our reserve targets, and we want to ultimately build to that blue line to meet those targets that were just adopted. Of course, this first pass, oh, and I will point out, right, that all these models have a lot of assumptions baked in, and what it doesn't have included is developer fees. We don't know the timing of those. We don't know how big those are. We know they can be quite substantial. We can, you know, easily get over $1 million a year if there's large developments happening.
unless someone has a really good crystal ball, we can't, figure out how to put that in there.
Yeah, but we don't have that many big projects.
Well, there are, for the HIA that are proposed, and we also hear that those are slowing down. When we have a big, apartment residential project, those developer fees add up very quickly because it's on a per
Correct,
unit
but,
basis,
but
so.
those
if they
we
happen,
can easily
they happen.
find out, yeah, but I don't know. Within the next 12 months, if we're gonna have that much potential revenue coming in.
Yeah, exactly, so we can't assume it enough to put it in, the budget of the rate structure, but
Right.
we know that something is likely to come in, we just can't
Yeah,
account for it.
so you did not include,
Yeah, so it's not included, and the same with if we're
so if we
successful
do,
with,
that will be the little icing on the cake.
Yeah. and that's why, these are max limits that you adopt. Obviously, whatever money comes in, we'll do the analysis every year, see how much we actually need to adjust rates. If we don't have to adjust them that high,
Yeah.
great. And, it also doesn't account for any grants that we could potentially get. If we're successful at that, if we're successful at any appropriations, we can't assume that. But that could bring that green line higher.
Okay, so the development is not in our control, grants could be. So if you were to throw a number percentage wise as far as our chances of getting grant money, what would you do, 50-50, 40-60, 60-40?
They're competitive.
Yeah,
That's,
they are,
they're in our control as much as if we don't apply for them, we're not gonna get them.
yeah,
If we do apply for them, we have a chance of
Okay.
getting them, and it depends on every grant program. So when I was consulting, I did a bunch of grant writing for the drought implementation, or the drought response grant, where, everyone submitted projects. Everyone crazy submitting projects. And the ask to the state was something like, actually, I wish I remember the number specifically. I want to say it was like 200% of the available funds. Right? It was so oversubscribed. And we did win one, North Coast. We got North Coast some money.
mhm,
Didn't get Mid-Penn money, unfortunately. We tried for the Dakota project. But it depends, it all depends. So. And I'm not as familiar with all the programs out there to give a good estimate, but what I can say is what, I've been talking with Jubin a lot is. How do we look at that whole huge CIP list? And let's identify projects, not just on a 5-year basis, but do a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year basis. Let's figure out what projects are most, have the most kind of multi-benefits and likely to be successful with grants or other appropriations. Successful with the state, revolving fund, the low interest state loans. And let's work into our process, figure out how to design early planning for construction later so that we have the time to apply for grants and get that funding in place and look at it from that lens. Rather than kind of, how we've been doing things so far. Of course, you can't do that instantly. That's a multi-year process to get positioned for grants and to build that in, but. Yeah, we are where we are right now. So. And then the other thing which comes up later is this assumes a pretty high interest rate on debt financing, because again, that's, what's recommended by HF&H. It's actually an interest rate that's higher than what Wilkinson is seeing people are getting right now today. So people are getting, doing debt financing, doing, bond sales at just under 5%, and we're assuming 5.5%. So everything in here is very conservative because it has to be.
mhm.
So the reality, hopefully, will be something that, so keep that, squint your eyes a little bit when you look at these.
Yeah.
That context. So the next slide, and you'll see that each scenario here has a similar slide that looks at the specific bill impacts, both single family residential and current. So that first pass, which would increase, revenue by 64% over that 5-year period, would result in, on average, a $46 increase in single family residential bills per month. You'll see as you kind of compare scenarios that, which it was super counterintuitive, and Ren and I looked into it, pulled our hair out a little bit. The 5-year increase in dollar amount doesn't directly correspond with that overall, 5-year revenue percent increase. And that has to do with the way the rates in the model are distributed between single family and multifamily and what's fixed rate and whatnot. So there's like a lot of nuance in the model that it's not directly correlated.
And these all assume no HHE pass-throughs, no increase in rates, is that right?
I would say so, no.
I think, I wanna say, I think the model does, I have to double check, but I'm like 90% certain that it does include the assumptions that SFQC provided last year,
Oh,
which included no increase for
Yeah.
the next, I think, 3 years, which we learned wasn't true, and then that's been updated, of course. So, but since they haven't given us better numbers, it has what they projected.
yeah.
But I just don't super believe what they projected, given that their habit has been to go higher than what they project, so.
And you
Yeah,
said
but
they projected nothing for 3 years and then an increase.
Yeah.
And that's what this.
They
stuff is
projected-
based
no increase this year
on. Right.
and gave us an increase. So that, this year's increase, of course, is included. But the subsequent increases, I mean, we're just using the numbers they give us.
Okay.
So the best we can do without just making something up. So the next version, that was the initial revision we did to the, prelim 5-year, where we kind of cut some moderate costs on Folger and dairy. We shifted the timing of a couple of, the tank projects. And shifted the 101 crossing a little bit. And you can see we brought the total down only by 2 million, and the timing shifted, and then we ran the rate scenario to see what that looks like. And with this structure here, because of the way we shifted things around and approached it this way, after 5 years, it's actually a 70% revenue increase and about a $55 bill increase over that period. And that shows, the orange circle, we're actually dipping below those operating reserves, which, this certainly would be is a board decision of whether or not you're comfortable modeling at that. Once you kind of squint your eyes and know that potentially there's other revenue sources, but maybe that's in reality above the line, but how do you want to approach it from policy level? And so when we get to slide 18 here, or 120, page 120, that is sharpening our pencil even more on that. It's pulling out about $10 million of the CIP investment. And you'll see that the total cost for Dairy Lane that I have holding in here is about $15 million. That was where we were at the point in our cost estimations and cutting that. So we left it at 15 million. If I revised it today, I would probably bring it to 13 million. Hearing your all feedback with the 12.2 and then add a little cushion and call it 13 for good measure. But that's what this is based on. So and it's shifting the tank projects even a bit more. And cutting the unspecified projects by 4 million. Which, well, yes, it's easy enough to kind of cut unspecified projects on paper. As you talked about, that has real implications on what we're doing and how we're trying to work towards that theoretical goal of $7 million of pipe replacement a year. We're getting it further away from that, AWWA recommendation.
Yeah, I guess that was, one question is, what's that unspecified projects? What's the confidence?
Well,
that you can get?
we have a list of, close to 90 projects to pull from, right? So we're never gonna have a shortage, Director Schmidt, of projects. It's just how we rank it and how it kind of bubbles up. So if the board says you have $5 million a year, we can just pull from that list of we have a list of specified projects, it's just that it's just not shown here, so.
Okay,
And the final version will have something there, it's just kind of a placeholder at this point.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry, I had to run to the restroom, but I'm looking at the spreadsheets, the version 2 and version 3, and I'm trying to figure out exactly the differences.
So between version 2 and version 3, the total CIP investment number is brought down by about $10 million. So there's a $10 million cut. As well as,
But they're both 46
Yeah,
million. right?
they're exactly, the spreadsheets
Did I-
are exactly the same, so that's why I'm so.
and I might. So what happened here is we noticed the bottom line today wasn't summing correctly. And so I must have been trying to get it done at like 4 o'clock today. Must have copy and pasted. The same.
I think the table's the same.
Yeah, I think I must have
Yeah.
just copy and pasted it the same. And so here, the older version, I bet has 2 different versions. So CIP version 2, that only had a couple, that one should be about 54 million dollars total.
Okay.
So that's the difference. The total investment is about $54 million in version 2, and then version 3 cuts it down to 46 million, which is 10 million from the original 56. Oh, sorry about that. That was copy paste errors. So what we did is, with this new revised, and like I said, we identified, we could cut, 2 million from Dairy Lane, we could put it to the other projects. But for purposes of, we gotta run some scenarios. We ran with this and we got as creative as we could in trying to figure out how we could pace. The timing of the projects, the timing of debt financing, the timing of what percentage of increases. So that's what you're looking here is 5 different, and you have 2 more scenarios from from the Monday version. But it's the timing. So the first one here is trying to get relatively even distribution of rate increases over time. And meeting that $46.5 million mark. And so that results in 62.4% revenue increase and a $50 a month increase in the water bills. And you can see what those increases look like. It's still big to have 2 12% increases right on top of each other, followed by 9, 9, 9. But it does, meet the variety of targets we're trying to meet. So that's one option. We also looked at, under scenario 2, what if we really tried to minimize that second increase since it falls, 6 months after the first increase? And, really that increase you're showing here is driven
You
by.
were talking about scenario 3, I think.
She's on CIP
I know,
version
it's-
3 scenario 2.
I'm sorry, there's so many scenarios. Yeah, it's version 3 scenario 2, page 124.
2.
Just to show you that we're trying every option we can think of, So this is a fairly even distribution of rate increases, minimizing the July 2025 increase. Still meeting our debt coverage ratio, still meeting our targets. And so this is what it looks like. It's an overall 66% revenue increase. But the way this is structured, which is, kind of interesting to me how we figured out the single family bill. It's actually one of the higher options, higher scenario here is at $66 per month increase over that 5-year period. So I have to say, it was remarkable to me how counterintuitive some of these things change the final result. So that's why there are so many iterations, we're trying to get at and try to understand just how it all works and how we can minimize impacts to customers. The next scenario, scenario 3 on page 126. Looks at really delaying that second round of financing. And minimizing the July increase as well. So that is an initial 17.5% increase with, $10 million financing in the first year. That gets us right at the debt coverage ratio. A 4% subsequent increase followed by 10, 10, and 10. And so that's really driven by the shift in timing. And the impacts for that, so that results in a 63% revenue increase and a $50 impact on bills. And then after we ran those scenarios, we're gonna put this together if you wanna talk through.
Yeah, just bear with me here, so.
I took one look at it, I was like, what is this?
This is, remember in first grade, you had a color in between the lines, that's what I was trying to do here. Actually, if you start on the far left-hand column over there, you see the 4 different CIP scenarios, you see the $56.5 million over 5 years. Version 2 was a 53.5, and then versions 3 and 4 were the 46.5. So those were the different scenarios you're looking at. Then I said, okay, what are the things that you want to take a look at, or I'd want to take a look at? I was hoping something would just kind of drop out here that's, oh, here's the magic bullet, and so I took a look at the revenue increase each time there was going to be a rate increase. So each one of the columns going to the right is one of the rate increases. Then I also put in here the cumulative revenue increase for each one of those rate increases. Then the debt coverage ratio, which is not, that just, I wanted to have that in there. And then the single family rate increase that happened each time there was going to be a rate adjustment, and then that cumulative impact to the single family rate. So the colors are, if it's green, that means it's the highest, percentage or dollar figure in each column, in each of the columns. And the yellow means that it's the lowest in each of the columns. So what was interesting to me is, that first CIP, that $56.5 million over 5 years, it was going to generate $4.3 million in pay-go for 5 years. And after that, $4 million in pay-go the subsequent 5 years, right? And it was going to have a $5 million debt issue in fiscal year 24-25, followed by a $27 million debt issue in fiscal year 25-26. When all that played out, when you took all the information from all the tables and charts that Kat showed you and just plotted in this simple matrix here, you found out that she said that the cumulative effect to the customers was over 5-year period, a rated increase of 63.6% or almost 64%. And the overall impact to the single family wallet was $46.06 over each month for the 5 years. And it was interesting enough, that was the largest, amount of money that we would have for the capital, right? The $56.5 million. But it was also the least impact to the customers of $46.06 per month in that 5-year period, right? When you took a look at the one kind of in the middle, that first row of January 1st, 2025, the yellow one that's got the 12% in there, that is the scenario that had the least, rate adjustment to the customers at 12%, a lot lower than 25%, right? But when you played that all out, it was a 62.4% rate increase to customers compared to the 64 for the other one. But the overall impact to customers was $50.37, and it was only going to generate $46.5 million of monies for capital. So that's kind of like, Kat was just saying that some of the stuff just doesn't, make sense.
It's not as intuitive.
It's not as intuitive as you would think.
Well, what was the interesting takeaway there was what's, really unique about the first version wasn't what we were trying to get in our scenarios, was it had that first year a really big increase.
Right.
Followed by a lower one.
By lower one, yeah.
So then we said, okay, let's take the lower total CIP, the $46 million target. Let's apply a big first year increase of 25%. So that's what you're seeing on the next scenario here, scenario 4. What does it look like if we took a 25% increase that first year, followed by a teeny tiny 2% the next go around, and then some single digit 8 to 9% increases after. And it also allows us to do more debt financing up front, to do a $15 million and to break it out that way. And we could even, adjust it so the second debt financing maybe happens the subsequent year, right? So we can continue to iterate, play on it, right? But what that does is it gives us overall just a 62% revenue increase and, a $49 impact on bills. So I thought, that was really helpful approach. I know that a 25% single year increase is significant. But it's $16 a bill increase. It's not, nobody wants to. We're all trying to figure out what's the most palatable approach that's gonna get the district what it needs. And I think, it's helping us get closer to that. And then the final scenario, I know there was a lot of, or it was expressed, what if we could just do a single digit increase? Let's just keep the increases single digit. What does that mean? And so this next final one is squeezing everything within a single digit increase. It means the first round of debt financing is, on the lower side, and then the second round comes, is actually delayed, sorry. We can't do the financing the first year, so. The financing comes in the second and third years. Because of the limitations of the model, it doesn't reflect, there would actually be a much bigger dip in revenues here because everything would have to be pay-go in the first couple of years. But this is what that could look like where, and one thing to note is the larger increases are sustained even beyond the 5-year period. The other ones, we kind of assume around a 4%. And the kind of subsequent beyond the 5-year planning period. But here, to meet this and to, get our reserves up to the target, we have to continue to have larger increases. So with that, it would result in an overall 54% revenue increase, and it would be a smaller impact on the bills of $44. But it's not a, if you're looking at $44 versus 49 or 46, it's not a massive difference. But if you are looking at whether you're being told it's 25% or 9%, certainly one feels better than the other, but in the end, the impacts, we just kind of keep landing at the same answer.
But this one, we end up falling below our reserve goal.
Yeah, and it depends how hard you want to squint at those numbers, and I think, HF&H might push back on wanting to put their stamp on that, but,
Because
they're policy decisions, and you just adopted that policy.
yeah, we'd be $1 million less than the reserve number.
And then just for fun, we ran all of these scenarios the second way. So I just want to bring up the interest rate consideration. So that's the next slide here. So as I mentioned, the model for HF&H assumes a 5.5% debt financing rate. Wolf Hansen says currently they're about 5%. They anticipate in their crystal ball interest rates dropping and more realistically if we were to go out for a bond being closer to 3.5%. And there was also, President Zuka brought up, well, we don't want to finance sooner than we can spend the money because we're paying on that, et cetera. So we had the discussion with Wolf Hansen. Is there any way around that? Is there any way to mitigate that? And they pointed out, and James knows a lot more about it than I do, but there is a mechanism called the demand deposit slug, which is specifically an IRS product that allows you to earn interest on the money you have financed, even though you haven't spent it yet.
And even though you're earning that interest, you are still avoiding arbitrage because it's a specific IRS tool. So I don't know that it would make us entirely whole, but it would get us a lot closer. So we could do that for Birch. I feel.
No,
After that.
it's just slugs are just a separate investment tool used to avoid arbitrage, because they do have a lower interest rate. As long as you don't earn more interest than you're actually paying out, then you should be good. So, and those are guaranteed to do that for you.
And so Wolf Hanson's suggestion was to get the better interest rates, et cetera, like, and if you're going out. You should really go out for 10 million or more. You shouldn't go out for less than 10 million, because then you start, your expenses.
The cost of issuance.
Yeah, the cost of issuance is higher. So with that in mind, again, looking at each of these charts, knowing you gotta squint your eyes, there's all these other factors that aren't accounted for. Here's each of the scenarios run and compare that with the 5.5 interest rate on top versus the 3.5 interest rate on top. Or sorry, on bottom. So you can think about that.
CIP V3 scenario one, I feel like I have to go back. So all of these ones that are here are the $46 million. Is that correct, or?
Yes.
They're all V3, which was cutting CIP investment by 10 million and delaying projects.
Yes.
Okay, you're right.
Unless you want to go back to spending more.
This does not include the possible 2 million we cut today.
That's right.
Doesn't include any grants, assumes no grants,
No grants.
and assumes no
Connection fees, or impact fees.
impact fees. And it seems like when I look at our budgets, our operating revenues versus expenses, we're always running ahead.
Yeah, we're always putting that in the reserves.
So,
Changes Tammy made.
that basically it seems like we're underestimating water consumption is the way I've kind of interpreted that people use more water than we anticipate. So that's why our,
I don't think that's true because,
Underspend,
no,
we more underspend
Yeah.
than over collect.
yeah,
Than underestimate the water consumption. So looking at the past couple of years' budgets, we've typically over budgeted on expenditure line items. And not spent that money, like there's a lot of like miscellaneous 50,000, 60,000 that kind of add up. That we haven't, that the district has not spent money on. Whereas the revenues have been coming in pretty close to what has been projected.
okay.
Well, we had been accumulating $1 million a year for the past 5 years or something like that.
Yeah,
Because we had raised rates. And we haven't dropped rates. So even though.
We haven't raised rates other than the SFPUC pass
Yeah,
through.
so SFPUC stopped raising their rates. And we didn't raise our rates, but our rates were high enough. That we were getting more than our operational numbers.
we also have staff vacancies
Yeah.
and we also don't
Yes.
typically budget for much in the way of developer fees. We budget very slim on that and then
And-
we've had some
Those
larger.
And we
projects.
sold a couple of pieces of property.
Yeah.
and-
yes, on one hand, those developer fees might drop for a little while. The other hand, for the last 5 years or longer, we've been mostly in a drought. So the revenues are probably depressed from that, and we're still putting money away.
What we're
So-
still not seeing rapid rebound either, so.
That's true.
Well, we don't want our customers to just start using so much water, too,
Right.
Yeah, that's that fine line.
right?
And what we see historically is after there's a drought, there's always minimal rebound. You never go back to your pre-drought. So you're always chasing on the budget. Your pre-drought numbers, which never will come back, so.
So how significant are the fees if we do 2 rounds of financing versus a single round of financing?
Pretty much, I think every single scenario, we assumed 2 rounds of financing.
Yeah.
And the reason is we need the money up front with all these projects. And to meet a debt coverage ratio for the full, 30 million financing, it's even higher, so.
Right.
And then we have very high rates and our reserves would skyrocket.
Yeah, because
You
as I remember the numbers on the 2016 bonds, it was $50,000 or something like that. Was the initial fees,
The cost of the issuance?
yeah.
Tammy, do you remember the cost of the issuance for the 2016 COPs?
You mean the percentage?
Yeah.
We were all in for 3.45.
Do you remember the dollar though? Was it $100,000, $50,000? I don't
Oh,
remember.
it's on the website. I'll have to
Was
look
it on the
at it.
website?
The cost of issuance assumption in the model, I'm fairly certain, I'm remembering correctly, is 1.5%.
Yeah,
And we did ask Wolfenson,
yeah,
and they said, yes, that feels right for this size. The bigger the bond, the smaller the percent of issuance cost, the smaller,
yeah.
some of those are just fixed charges.
Yeah, I mean, but it's another enormous number if you do 2 issuances as opposed to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the amount of the issuance? I didn't hear.
All of these scenarios look at $30 million
Okay.
total,
Yeah,
depending how you split it, the timing, and the assumptions driving that 30 million is that projects like with a longer lifespan are financed and then shorter lifespan are
There you go.
pay-go. So the building projects are financed, the Dakota tank replacement and the 101 crossing are financed, and the tank recoating and other, unspecified pipe replacement projects are pay-go.
Yeah.
Can I just go back to Rena's chart?
You like that, huh?
Well,
yeah.
it's, once I understood what you were doing, then it was very, it made sense to me. Yes, Rena, I like your.
I was hoping something was gonna pop out of the thing.
Okay, so here's what, when you said that, and then the reason I asked about your version 3, and maybe I'm missing something. Because the CIP version 1 is where we have the most money, correct?
Yeah,
56.5 million.
Right,
But the cumulative impact to a single family home for the 5 years is $46 versus 55 versus 50 and versus 50. And in the other scenarios, we're actually getting less money.
right.
So my question is, did I see that correctly? And if that's the case, then why wouldn't we do scenario 1? Because it's impacting our ratepayers less and we're getting more money to give them better service.
It's just that first year, it's that first bite, right? 25% first bite, but then after that, it's the rate increases are much less. And then the overall impact is less to the wallet of the single family customer.
Yeah, because you're getting your revenues coming in early.
I understand that, but that's what I'm saying. If I am, I'm a paying customer, right? We're all paying customers. And we're gonna end up paying over 5 years more. Then I would want to pay over 5 years less than. Like the impact is less when you get the big hit at the front.
But trying to sell that 25% isn't really
Right.
the big thing.
And a 25 followed by a 10. That's the biggest driver, is the fact that it's 25 followed by a 10 versus a similar scenario, which is a
Right,
25 followed by
we'll
a
just
2.
print run a sheet.
Oh, God. I wanna see that in your customer brochure. Can I get here for that? Was it 25% on January 1st? Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just sitting here
yeah.
It's
doing
on,
the
yeah,
schedule.
it's on, yeah. And so, I mean,
And
So-
10% again in July.
and
Yeah.
here's the nice-ish thing about the timing, but it's not, none of it's nice, right?
Yeah.
But if we have the big rate increase in the winter when people are using less money,
The water.
Water.
water,
they're definitely using more money in Christmas time, right? But they're using less water, they're gonna see it a little bit less, and then we have the smaller increase in the summer. It tempers the effect they'll feel the best we can. I mean, nothing's perfect, but it's a slightly better.
As opposed to some of the others where you're doing 12 in the winter and another 12 in the summer and then another 12 the following. Yeah.
And I mean, and just to remind, I mean, it's not great, but it's the reality we have. It's not shown in these charts, but there was just a 9% here in July. So then we're looking at a 25% in January and a 2% in July, or, you know, it's every 6 months we're having an increase right now.
I'm just
not
trying to
make
see how
that
you guys
feel
could do
better.
it. I was literally just doing the schedule while you guys were talking about that, and I just think it's a lot of communications with your customers. And you better be making a decision quickly if you plan on implementing January 1st. I mean, I just literally did the schedule for you. Remember when I sent it to you months ago?
Yeah.
And you're pushing getting the brochure out to really tell your story. Because it's a story you can tell. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
not with Rena's chart, but.
I try to simplify the.
I know, I've been long enough to know, yeah, you're gonna have it, put in a real small version in it.
But you chose the wrong colors.
I know.
It's just the story to be told, it's just, I see John, I don't know, John dropped
Jumped off.
He jumped off, okay, I mean, you know, it's just getting it together and getting the message out there. Having the time to do that, don't rush it.
We haven't had any rate increases for whatever was the last
Since
5
19.
years,
That's
right?
part of the story.
You know, so I don't know, I understand that 25% is a lot and it's not lost on me. But when I look at, I like Rena's chart. When I look at it, you know, it makes more sense to me, like overall, but I understand how we sell it is gonna be a challenge. But if we're trying to not just prevent the tanks from rolling down the hill, but having them be at the capacity that they should be in the event of a, you know, a natural disaster where we need water, then these are all things that, you know, we need to think about, and maybe that's part of our messaging, right? Like we have all these capital projects.
It absolutely is. I mean, we name the project, we talk about the benefits. We need to do this to provide water to you on a day-to-day basis. We need to provide water to you in an emergency. We also need a building to provide that on a day-to-day, you know,
Yeah.
No,
perhaps.
the tough part of it is that we've got 2 building projects on there.
Yeah.
That are the largest items.
Yeah.
That's true.
Almost, the tanks are.
No, the buildings are. None of my stuff even gets close to the buildings, so.
You know, and part of the story is that, look, we are going to more, you know, proactively pursue grant funding. We're gonna try, this is the, you know, highest that we might raise rates, but we are going to try to bring that number lower. We're working for you to bring that number lower, but this is what we need to improve. Yeah. I mean, it's
I
all
would
part of the
definitely tell the
story.
story about some of the development capacity charges over these past 5 years that helped stabilize your expenditures. I mean, you don't want to go too far because, I mean, just from past experience, they'll come in and go, hey, why did you allow all that development and all that water, additional water usage? Brian's neighborhood. And that's another story to tell, right? But
We're not the land use authority.
yeah, no, I'm just sitting here thinking about, you know, just in the past, what you might expect, and then just cramming the message down their throat with your time frame.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be tough.
I think Kathy has a good point about
Is it dead?
version 1 versus the other versions. Although on the other hand, the 56 million, tell me otherwise, but it seems like that's a relatively arbitrary number based on the CIP. And it could be more, or it could be less.
All of
So-
these, I mean, it's. We did the analysis where it covers just operations, right? That's what we need. And to raise rates, absolutely. Everything beyond that becomes a board judgment call of how much can we invest in the system. And buildings and everything else.
Yeah, if you look at the bars we're spending. The capital improvement program that we proposed is like 3 or 4 times what we've ever put in any one year previously.
But that's part of it because, you know, we need to spend money to rebuild over there. So if we spend them in those timetables,
Right.
it's gonna drive those bars up quite a bit, right?
Yes.
And even our non-building projects are the larger projects, the
Right.
scale of projects we've been doing.
The replacement of the COVID tanks, you know, $11 million.
Right. So, but just the whole idea that we have to spend all this money in 3 years or 4 years type of thing. It is really.
And can we do it too? I mean,
Well, I mean, if they were pipeline projects, you know, you've been talking in the past
I-
that we have a certain capacity to go out there and manage pipeline projects, but in this case. You know, building at Folger and Dairy Lane, we're gonna have different people managing those projects. It's not gonna be Jubin's office or us, you know?
Right.
But, you know, doing the pipeline and the tank projects, that's gonna be us, and there might be some consulting construction managers, kind of like a Four Leaf or TRC or Tanner Pacific helping us with those projects. So we've figured out that, yeah, there are certain projects that we're gonna do ourselves, which is we typically do, and that's the $3 to $4 million a year level. But spending 12, 13, 14 million dollars, we're gonna have to have other people helping us. But we would anyways, because they're outside of our professional capabilities to manage those kind of projects. We can get them delivered.
So Brian, I would argue the word arbitrary. I think, I would argue against that. I would suggest that it's not arbitrary. I think it's different. We have different capital programs, tanks, pump stations, buildings. And if you stack those on top of each other, in this case, in the next 3 to 4 years, they are getting stacked on top of each other. Usually they're a little bit more spread out, but a tank project is independent of a pipeline project. It doesn't take as much staff resources. So we can, looking at these projects, I'm very confident that we can deliver these projects in the timeline that's given, especially because the Decoven project is already designed. So that was already designed. If you recall, we went out to bid about 3 years ago. Bids came in really high, although, right, like you always say, like things get more expensive and you look at the dollars now relative to the bids we received and they're a bargain. So the resources that takes in one parcel that we can build this tank with a construction manager that we hire out, and then run a pipeline project in concurrent with that. It is achievable, but it's the total dollars that are really at your. Right, they're gonna come to you for discussion purposes, but I'm very confident everything on this list, whatever version you go with. Is achievable, and that's why it's 56.5 versus 65 million. Right, so the 56 is what we can deliver. 65 we can't, right, so.
okay, so I get that you think that it appears to be a deliverable level of funding. But one example I was playing in my mind was version 1 structure. But version 4, we're cutting 4 million out of the CIP, not that it's, that we're saying it's never gonna be done.
We're
Just
deferring
be
it,
done.
we're deferring it.
Right.
The best,
Right.
yeah, so it's, sorry, go ahead.
Right, and so that, and there's a societal cost, I guess, putting it off. What if something goes wrong before you eventually get around to doing it? But anywhere you choose, short of the point at which we're at maximum capacity, you're making that type of choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's why it's a board decision. We're giving you options, but you're absolutely correct, that you're deferring those projects, and there's a cost to that. There's a dollar value cost to that, right? Because that project is now more expensive when you build it, but there's also a risk component to it, which is what I was trying to explain at the beginning, what the risk is, so.
And also point out that if we approve, whatever we approve, 46 million, right? And we're successful in getting those grant funds and we're successful getting some, funding from the legislature. And where we have a ton of developer impact fees come in, right? Every year you get to make the decision of, do we want to raise rates to the max or less?
if we are looking at our projects and we want to speed up some projects and we have the funding, we can go ahead and raise rates to the max because we are able to invest those dollars in our system sooner. And that's a perfectly valid decision that you get to make every year. And hopefully that would be a decision.
Yeah, the new money gives us options. We either accelerate stuff or we don't raise the rates as much as we
Yeah.
do.
Or a combination of both, which we've done in the past.
So by now I've forgotten what staff is looking for.
So,
Just really it says-
Do I need to create another chart?
so what I would like is guidance on one or two scenarios to, either further refine or run with, so that HF&H, so the next step will be, we'll schedule a study session for HF&H will be here. They'll run through their other analyses on the rate options. They'll also go through the restructuring of the rates, because that's another component, is we're changing tiers around and all of that. So they'll go through the full shebang on that, at a study session dedicated just to rates, and CRPs, why not? And with work, right? So that's what I want, is like, before I have them spend their time and money, I want to get close to something you are probably going to be comfortable with passing. So we can then get that study finalized, and we can start our outreach process, which we
Because
definitely.
you can't do it without that study, right, Julie?
So
That study is the backbone.
before we do that, Kat, do we have any idea what other agencies are gonna be doing as far as rate increases? And this increase that we're looking at, where would the arrow go here?
Which increase?
The
And a
25%.
1-year increase or the 5-year increase, I mean, I understand the need and desire to look at the other agencies in context, but they're all looking at the same problems, whether they have already invested a bunch in capital, or they're just now starting to, like Westboro. Westboro is just now increasing their rates,
Yeah, well,
right, so,
Westboro is just,
right, because they've been deferring, right, and so.
yeah.
And, if you remember, this district for a long time did defer, and in recent years, we've, been investing a lot in capital, but it had a history of deferring, so we're still making up for some of that lost time. So, I mean, we can try to, HF&H, they have a slide where they, basically, it's their other clients, they have that information.
Yeah.
But I don't have it
This
for everyone.
district was deferring only because it was kind of prior to the WISIP program. The WISIP was the one that kind of changed everything, And the world has been a little the same since, so. But anyway, what my point is that anytime we look at that, we need to keep this chart in mind, because this is what people understand the most.
Not run this table?
And if you look at page 108, that's July this year. And we do scenario 1 as stated, add 25% to our costs. And we're right there with these pallets of, assuming nobody else changes in January by that much. It's probably a pretty good call though, that we're gonna be number 5, maybe number 4 in January.
So that's about a $16 increase.
Is that to the average
25%?
bill? Is it the
the
average or
average.
the lowest bill?
Average.
Okay.
So
25% of $90. $16.
because it's 25% of revenue,
Oh, right.
and there's not an even distribution between single family and multifamily, and that's where you get lost in the weeds, and I want HF&H to make sure that we're modeling things correctly, and
Slightly less bad.
and they might, I have no idea how their process works. They might take our increase and say, oh, I need to change some other assumptions within the model. But we just need to give them something that they can actually analyze and study at this point that we have. So I guess, the question ultimately is, if you had to raise rates tomorrow, what scenario feels best to you? And then we can further iterate and try to make it, as less impact on the customers as we can. But we need that direction to do that analysis, or we could just spend days, I could do 27 more scenarios.
I can make some more charts,
With colors,
different colors.
Different colors on every chart.
within the lines, yeah.
I'll get my colored pencils out.
Well, we might finally have people showing up to our meetings.
That'd be fun, right?
No.
No.
Yes, that will not be fun. I've lived it.
Yeah, I,
We have two failures. in
All done,
Canada.
Brandon.
Okay, so, what direction is everyone thinking?
scenario one. Try and cut it back a little bit, but that's the structure. It's in the best interest of the people we're here to serve.
So if we could go for $50 million for the 5-year type of thing by reducing some of the deferrable components of Dairy Lane and possibly shifting some other portions around. A pretty hefty first year January number and a smaller July. And then keep the trailing portion of it under 10.
Yeah, so that first version was 25 and then 10, 10 and 4 and 4,
Starting January. 1st.
January 1.
But that was to get 55.
That's to get 56, yeah.
That was the
56.
full, yeah.
Yeah,
So we could
So if
pull
we
it
can
back.
get it to
cut
50,
10% out
right,
and get 50.
yeah,
Yeah,
see what that does.
make it to, so it's not a 25%.
Yeah, maybe it's 20% or 19 or something.
As long as the one in July is smaller, yeah.
And so that first iteration that did have, was a big and a big. And you get a lot of benefit because of the two big increases. So when you're trying to minimize that second one,
Yeah,
you lose something.
but it'd be interesting to see what that looks like on the average bill. But
So when we,
the question is, I guess,
19.
we're gonna sell it based on the average bill. That's what the advertising is basically gonna be.
Yeah, and I'll say, the
As
average,
opposed to the commercial bills.
the average bill we're analyzing here is 7 units, but I think the actual average is like 6.7, so we'll be selling it on 6.7. Well,
And not
It is what it is.
percentages, but dollars.
yeah, no percentages,
Yeah.
other than
Yeah,
where
do
it needs to be in
dollars.
the rate
Do
study,
dollars.
but in our
Yeah.
discussion, our messaging is not percentages.
Is your cable bills going up higher than this,
Yeah.
dollar wise?
Exactly.
but Kirk, to your point, I don't know if I would. Commercial, it's the SFR that we need to.
Yeah. I mean, it's a public perception and those are going to be people who are looking at the small bills or whatever. We'll have to have something that says what the minimum bill would be, because that would cover people like apartments or condos or something like that, where they don't have a lot of landscaping.
Yeah, we could look at different ways to, have the normal single family, but other ways we can. Show even lesser impacts.
Well, I think having something that says the minimum users are going to have much smaller numbers as far as the dollar amount.
But the median is supposed to average. Big difference or?
They're relatively close. I did ask the question. I forget the numbers exactly, but they're relatively close.
Yeah, I think you did, and we talked about it, and there was less than a 10% differences. Because so many users are all in this little band around the median, it ends up being the average.
So I'm hearing from one or two of you to look at about a $50 million investment structured similar to scenario 1 or scenario 4.
Where we get the increase maybe to 19% or
I was
something,
saying
or,
19, yeah,
yeah.
the 19 on January 1st. So we just. started-
I mean, I know we're talking percentages and I don't know, even know how much difference that's gonna make in the dollars. Probably not
No,
very
but the
much, but
optics, the
Right,
optics are
yeah.
very,
Yeah, okay, we can try to shoot for that.
very
Okay.
confused the number.
And then we can go back to saying, well, you know, we haven't had a rate increase for 5 years, and if we just followed the rate plan, then it would be 18%. So,
Well, if we did cost of living or CPI rather, it would have been 18.7%, so
Right.
it will be 19%. Yeah, so that's just how much costs have gone up.
and. a
And we're
lot of-
so efficient at our spending that costs have gone up that much, and we're still able to invest $50 million, right? Maybe so.
They're still gonna argue about how much
Yeah.
we're spending, but yeah.
Okay. We will get that to HF&H, and we have one other little tiny agenda item before we get to scheduling the meeting, so.
okay, so you have enough direction?
Yes, and thank you for your patience going through all of these scenarios. I know not everyone loves looking at charts and tables and colorful tables like Brenna and I, but, and James. But
All right,
I think it's helpful that you see the thought process, because
yes, thank you for that. Okay, item 8E.
All right, let's talk numbers.
Consider resolution 2024-12, approving the FY 2024-25 operating and capital budgets.
All right, so we have met several times over the past couple months. In between Monique, Brenna, Pat and I, and then also solicited. We've also met with the finance committee meeting twice on April 18th, May 16th, to go over the detailed budget. And so what we've provided here is just kind of a summary of all those results. Now, we did present this to you last board meeting, but there were, how many changes did I have? 5 changes we have made since the last one, since our last meeting. So we've added $150,000 for tree removal and maintenance. That we got a quote, and it came out $150,000 more than we were expecting. And then also $30,000 for tree replacement.
we don't have the quote yet, working on the quote yet.
Oh.
We did some further analysis, figuring out what trees specifically we want to remove and
Right,
estimate. So
sorry, yeah.
so it's a refined
misspoke.
estimate. The quote we should get in September.
Then
That
we,
was for 1 year? 150,000?
yes,
Thanks.
We got. We have
Yeah, I
more
remember
trees
from
that we
finance,
want
we
to
have
address.
a lot of trees.
We have a lot of trees and they haven't had, we haven't looked at them as closely as,
Should,
well, we're now looking at them closely.
we've also added 30,000 for tree replacement. And then we went back and looked and added back the 35,000 for cathodic protection survey, so it was determined that we needed to do that soon. And then other change was added for the UWMP support, added additional 50,000. And then there was a couple changes for the capital projects related to, we took away Hallmark North recoding, as well as West Belmont North tank recoding. So we removed those from PAYGO capital financing. We also took away the Tacoma tanks and the PAMP hospital. Took those away from the projected debt financing for the current year, or for fiscal year 25. And then we also revised the estimate down for Dairy Lane by about $540,000. So those are the changes that we've made since the last meeting. Overall comparison to the current budget, the fiscal year 24 budget. Water commodity charges as well as purchase water charges both went up. The water commodity charges went up by 932. And then purchase water charge went up by about 600,000. And then that's also, there's a couple other small increases for like faucet increases and whatnot. Maintenance and repairs went up by 137,000. And then there's one in particular, the system surveys that increased by 700,000, and that's for a one-time assessment. That needs to get done. It's considered a project, but it's not a capitalized project, so it's actually included in the operating budget. So that was a significant hit to the budget. And then salaries and wages, that increased by 513 because now we're gonna be fully staffed. So those are the big increases from the current year to what's gonna happen here in 2 weeks that we have proposed to you. Overall, the capital project, the capital highlights, so we've got capital items for $400,000. That's for capital related equipment. A little over $1 million in PAYGO capital project, and you can see those detailed projects on page 147. As well as what kind of equipment we're considering purchasing. And then the proposed debt financing is for approximately $4.2 million. And you can see those two projects there, Dairy Lane, at least the first phase of it, and then Boulder Drive property improvements.
And I'll point out, based on the last discussion, the only thing based on the discussion would really change here in the capital is the, this is a design number for, Dairy Lane, which is based on a percentage of construction. So if we pull the overall, construction costs down, you know, this is part of the design, and then the rest of the design will fall into the next year. So we don't really need to change numbers here, to meet that assumption. It's just, everything's an assumption of how much is gonna fall this year versus next year, and so it would be sufficient to leave it as is.
And everything else has pretty much remained static from last year. No significant other cuts or changes. Yeah, that's about it. But that's all, folks.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I did have one typo in the reso though. It's a total capital budget. That'll have to correct. Capital. Which one?
149,
49, yeah.
top of the page.
Oh, yeah, there it is. And tell us,
Yeah,
Capital.
capital, yeah.
tittle.
Okay. Questions, comments, or does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move resolution 2024-12.
We have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
We got a roll call.
Yes, please.
Okay, Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Director Bella,
Yes.
Director Wheeler,
Yes.
and Vice President Jordan.
Yes.
Okay, motion is approved.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Does anybody need a bio break? Because we haven't gone this long for a while. I'm just
I
gonna
helped
ask.
myself to my bio break.
Okay. If everyone's. Okay, item 8F, identify date for rate study session special meeting.
All right, so I have the dates, that, so the goal is to have Wolf Hansen there, to have HF&H, to have James, Juben if you're available, or someone from your team. So, and of course, summer being a busy month. So the first date that's available for all of those is July 16th, a Tuesday. Does that work for folks?
Which date?
July 16th, and unfortunately, we don't have residents over here. But. At what time? 6:30, 6:30, whatever does work for people.
Yeah, that works for me.
16 is good.
Really?
Okay. I can move some.
Well, Lewis has not said anything yet.
July 16, hold on a second.
Neither has Zuko.
Why, he's gonna be on vacation at some point towards the end of the month.
He's going,
Maybe going on a hiking trip or something.
Yeah, he's not gonna be here for the July meeting, that's because he told me, so that's why.
Yeah, it's like a 30-day or
Yeah.
so.
he's
It's a long trip.
doing part of the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
July
Well, 16th is the earliest date, it's the week before the board meeting, so there's a chance he'll still be
16th,
there.
I'll be in New York.
Wanna do it remote?
And I'll be traveling.
It won't be the
because
middle of the night for
8
you.
PM I'll leave, so.
So the next date, but otherwise is the 23rd, also a Tuesday.
Yep, that works for me.
It's okay.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure Matt won't be here if he's not gonna be here on Thursday.
What was the other thing?
23rd,
Uh,
a week later.
Put it there. Good. What time? Do we do it early? 5:30?
For people that
Right.
work out, yeah.
5:30, would that work for you?
I think so, yeah.
Kurt,
It's fine for me.
Kathy?
Would you say 5:30?
We'll see how that.
Sure.
Maybe you can join us virtually.
At a campfire,
From the woods.
Making s'mores.
making s'mores.
Then we could
If I
fill,
can do it from Bologna, he can do it from.
Need a cellular connection.
do you wanna fill out any other dates, just
Sure.
Sure.
to see, I mean, sounds like Matt won't be here regardless, probably, most likely, so. So the other dates are the next week, the 29th, 30th, and the 31st. And also the day after the board meeting, but I don't know. It's a Friday. So 29th, 30th, 31st.
Yeah, those are all fine for me.
They're all good for me. I'd have to, 31st, I'd have to start at 6:30.
we only available all 3 days.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, all 3 days,
What's your name?
29th, 30, 31st.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lewis, I think.
Which country will I be in on the 29th?
Sorry, Hawaii. I'll still be in the United States, come on.
Oh, I'm jealous of you.
Hawaii would be better because you'll be 3 hours behind.
There you go.
I'll be on the beach. No.
Yeah, he'll be a while, so. Campfire.
29. We do it late in the evening, it's better, like 6:30 instead of. Because later, but.
So the 29th, 6:30 works,
Yes, 29, 6:30 works,
and the 30th and 31st.
yes.
Okay, and then we have some options, and
Great.
Yeah,
awesome. Thank you.
the 31st is the least desirable.
Well,
Which
the
is
sooner the better, so that's
We're
always
tonight on
desirable
30th,
anyways.
yeah. Yeah,
The sooner we can do it, we'll do
But
it.
hopefully we'll be able to do it on the 23rd.
That's what we'll shoot for.
So when will you be able to confirm?
I'll send emails out tomorrow morning and
Oh.
confirm and all.
Okay, good, good.
Great.
So I don't do.
I can send emails out tonight.
All right, we good?
Yes.
All right, item 8G, receive report on California's San Francisco regional water system conditions.
you know, the water situation is looking really good. You know, it's still left over from last year and there was enough snow and rain, so it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna leave it at that unless somebody has a specific question on something that I have in there just to save some time, because it's getting late.
No, I'm good. Okay. On to item 9A, management reports, and we're switching it up. Financial reports for the month ending May 31st.
You're up, James.
James,
All right, more numbers. Is everybody excited?
So excited.
All right, so through May 31st, just kind of high level overview. So should be at about 92% of our budget. Revenues were about 90%, but it looks like over the history, we've had a large uptick in June, so I don't have any fear that we're not gonna hit that, that end of the year figure. So, yeah, we're currently at 90%. The overall total revenues are 87%, or excuse me, 88%. Operating revenues, though, are at about 90%. So overall, we're still doing really well. We still have this 1 month to catch up on everything, which again, I don't see any issues with that. Salaries and wages were about 75% of where we should be. Again, that's because of salary savings, you know, due to vacancies. The purchased water, we're right where we need to be at 92.6%, which is exactly 11/12 of the year for our budget. So that projection is coming out as close to perfect as can be. And then just moving down through the investments. So from all sources so far, we've reported about 631,000, which is about 93% of our amended budget. A lot of that has to do with unrealized gains on investments, and because we are seeing that uptick in investment interest rates, we're probably going to have a higher unrealized gain this year. So overall, you know, our interest revenue is probably going to be hitting at about 110, 150% at the end of the year. That is pretty much our biggest increase that we've had for the entire year. Let's see here, cash and cash equivalents. We did have a decrease of about $400,000 from the prior year as of this point this year. We've just had more payments go out during the month of May than we did last year, is the reason that's happening. And then just overall, everything is trending exactly where it should be. So, let's see here. And no other changes to anything else, so. Interest rates are pretty much, they've been for our investments, they've been pretty much static at about 4% for our LAIF, and then about 5.25% for the sweep account in BNY for the debt reserves, and also about 5% for Zions Bank. So those haven't fluctuated very much because we haven't purchased too many new investments yet.
any questions or comments for James?
Soon.
Do that rate analysis before all my presentations to wear everybody down.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we can move on. Yes. All right, district engineer.
Yeah, let's spend some money. I never talk about revenue, so you just tell me how much money you want to spend, we'll spend it. So Harbor Boulevard, we're all done, but we haven't closed it out with the county yet. We're waiting to, essentially, we have one correspondence left with the county, which is to just tell them that we're done. We're not gonna talk to you anymore, we're just walking away. We're waiting to do that, send that until Old County Road is done. It's a strategic plan for us because we're dealing with the county on Old County Road also. A lot of counties in that sentence, but essentially, we don't want to stir the pot before we finish Old County Road. We're very close. So within the next month or two, we're gonna send that correspondence. Our design engineer is working on closing out the project, which is what that task order was regarding, just record plans and the time requires to close out the project. The Colvin Lincoln Oak Knoll, we reached an agreement with the consultant on the addendum. If you recall, the last couple of months, I've been reporting out that they were concerned about liability and indemnification. District Council worked with their council and reached agreement with that. It actually got signed today, or the final signature was put on today, which is great. So the next step is to just finalize the 100% plans. It's budgeted for next fiscal year. You approve the budget to construct it. So as soon as the design is done, we're gonna go out to bid. So we'll let you know as we go down this process, but that's the next step. The capital improvement program, this is a rolling 5-year, long-term capital list. So it's not the funding stuff that you saw. It's more the mastered big list and the prioritization. So that's gonna come to you in July as a draft for you to look at. And if it looks good, we'll come back for the next meeting to accept a report. Every year in June, we provide you with our report card. I haven't come up with a better name, so I'm just gonna stick with report card if that works for you guys. Essentially, this just answers the question as far as you know, are we doing a good job with capital program? And then as your district engineer, how are we doing overall? So one aspect of our work is, or the main aspect of our work is expenditures on capital projects. And so one measure of that is change orders. Theoretically, if we do a good job, change orders should be low. And there is obviously things unforeseen that come up, like the rock on Harbor Boulevard. No matter what due diligence we could have done, I don't think we would have really thought about encountering rock on that area. So the measurement that we use is the non-owner initiated change orders. So it's the column there. It's not as color coded as Rena's chart, but we just focus on the yellow. Our target for that column is 5%. Industry standard in California for underground construction is 10%. So when someone comes to you and says, hey, board members, are we spending our money correctly? We're you know, for public works projects, you always hear these horror stories of massive cost overruns on projects. And so you could confidently say that we're at 3.7%. And before Harbor, it was 3%. So not that I'm bitter about Harbor, but it just.
But I'm bitter about it.
But I'm bitter about it. But we're still at 3.7%, which is really good for underground construction. So I did a cost comparison there at the bottom, you know, relative to 5%, relative to 10%. So you know, pretty good on Harbor, and hopefully we can, or pretty decent overall, and then hopefully we can bring that down, you know, on the next project, but we're averaging about 3.7%. Before I move on to the next one, does this chart make sense? And you see this every year. I just update the numbers basically. The next page is relative to the construction cost, the final construction cost, design cost, and construction management cost. How do they compare? And you could spend a whole lot of money on design and get that Cadillac or gold plated, and it should relate to much lower change orders. What I wanted to show here on this comparison is that relative to our target, where industry standard is, our design costs and construction management costs are at or below, but we're still able to bring projects in at pretty low, a pretty good change order rate. So we're not spending a ton of money on design over what you typically see on the industry. So some of them are higher, and I've tried to note that on the right-hand side. And it is important to note that smaller projects, relatively percentage-wise, obviously have a higher percentage of design, higher percentage of construction management. So it really makes sense to bundle projects, right? Because you get a much higher bang for your buck. And so the smaller projects, end up like the Hastings, Vine, Belmont Canyon ends up with a 25% total. Versus a 20% total for Harvard. And then the last page is our, billing rates. Frankly, I didn't spend a lot of time updating or trying to get comps. Because we're still in the ballpark of the 2022 billing rates of other folks. So I didn't really spend a lot of time trying to get other comps on that because our 2024 numbers are in the ballpark of the 2022 numbers. And they have probably gone up the last 2 years anyway, so I didn't really spend a lot of time on this, but again, it gives you a good comparison as far as, you know. You should be asking us, hey, how is your billing rate in the ballpark? And what we wanted to show is it is. So that's our report card for this year. If there's other data that you want to see, I can certainly provide and slice and dice this any way you want. If there's no other questions, I'll move on to OCR.
I like how concise it is.
Yes.
Great. I always think about if you run into a constituent at a picnic, if you have the answer to say that you're spending your CIP money diligently, right, and cost overruns and those kind of things. So I want to make sure you have that data. OCR, we're done with OCR. All work is complete, field work. We're doing a punch list at this point, and the punch list is almost done too. So what you see here is we have a change order that brings us up to 7.3% right now. If you can go to the next page, please. And we're going to be paying the contractor on this pay request $658,000. So nothing really stands out other than I wanted to just say that everything is done. But what I want to let you know is that we're at 7.3% this month, but fortunately or unfortunately, we're still negotiating a pretty big change order for the last closeout, which will be next month coming to you, which will put us around 11.5% for the project. There's substantially additional paving that we had to do. I think I've been mentioning that the last couple of months. And pavement and also pavement restoration right here on Ralston with additional striping. So that change order is going to be in the ballpark of about $200,000. And that's the last thing that's going to come in for this project. It's going to put the project around 11%. To be quite honest with you, for this size project with this kind of complexity, I would call it pretty good. I was expecting a lot more. Unfortunately, the change orders are more for the surface restoration. I would have much rather had been like stuff underground, but it's still in the ballpark of a really complicated big project. We were at staff level contemplating coming to the beginning of the project, asking for a 15% contingency. If you recall, we had that discussion and we decided to stay at 10% contingency and come to you if it's going to be more. So next month, when we come to close out this project, we're actually going to ask for a contract increase to match that final change order because it'll be over the 10% that you've approved. Right, so at the beginning of the project, you approved 10%. We're going to probably be at 11 or 12% once this is all done. But I'll dive into that change order next month, or Brandon will when he's here next month. But I just wanted to set the expectation for next month. Any questions I can answer on OCR?
Yeah, we've been talking on OCR for a long time, you know, so it's really great that it's been done without a lot of big problems, you know.
We got done in a lot less days than we thought too. We
Yeah.
budgeted 200 days for construction.
I think over 200 days.
Yeah, and they got done in like 120 days or something like that. So that's gonna save some money on the construction management part of it, right?
So on the final staff report, thank you, Rena, for reminding me on that. On the final staff report, the construction cost is going to be over 10%, but we're also going to show you that the construction cost will be over 10% change order, but we saved money on the construction management. So the approved contract, we're about 75% of that approved contract with our construction management firm and also our design consultant. We're somewhere around 50 to 60% on that expenditure. So overall, if you balance it all out, we'll be under 10%, but we still need to come to you for the increase for the construction contract. So, because it's a separate contract, but like, Rena said, and like you said, Louis, for the complexity of, and Brian also, for the complexity of this project, we were able to deliver it. We, as a team, were able to deliver it with minimal disruptions. That's all I have. Thank you for not having us last.
Be a fee in the door.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
No. Good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Administrative Services Manager.
All right, so you're looking the wrong direction because.
I'm like,
Monique is no longer Administrative Services Manager, she is Management Advisor. And 2 weeks ago, our new Admin Services Manager, Allison Bell, started. And then she probably went on vacation to Hawaii. So that's why she's not here tonight. But, you know, certainly now that she knows our schedule, but she had a pre-existing planned vacation. Her husband is actually, and his family's from Hawaii, so they go back to hang out with the family. But Allison's a great addition to the team. She actually comes from, her last job was Belmont. She was in HR at Belmont. To every single person from Belmont we have talked to absolutely loves her and hates us for stealing her away, including Ashton. Ashton actually credited her solely with fixing their hiring and retention problem. Because she brought some kind of creative strategies there and outreach, and just, she's clearly like, everyone respects her. So we're so happy to have her on the team. You know, she's got quite a bit to learn and get up to speed, and we're so glad Monique is here to smooth the transition and help support that. And also, you know, as that transition happens, take on some more projects before she retires and leaves us for good. But, so you'll meet Allison next month. Any questions on anything in her report?
Does she look local?
She lives in Redwood City. I literally ran into her at Costco. So, yeah, she's local.
Okay, Operations Manager.
Yeah, just quickly on the first page, down near the bottom, just pointed out that we installed some cameras for the outside of the dairy lane, you know, following the break in there. And so now, before we go in there, there's a box near the gate that we've got to go in there and shut off the alarm. We're working with Sonatrol to see if they can shut it off before people start showing up there, you know, just, you know, so they don't have to do the punch code or accidentally go in there, because I'll tell you right away, they give me a call, or they'll give her a call, they'll give Michael a call, you know, saying, hey, somebody's there. And the last thing we want is the police department to show up. So I just point that out. So that's a good thing. And we were planning on doing it. The theft there made us move a lot quicker. And then on the next page, I like to show the number of USA requests. Actually, it's 249. That's actually pretty low for May. I'm not sure what's going on there, but that's what the guys are reporting out in the field. You know, so again, it keeps us busy. We have a person full-time doing underground service alerts. And then the last thing on the administrative page, on the last page, we had an all hands JPIA training at the dairy lane. They did some defensive driver training for all employees and also confined space training. So that was a good thing. It was open to all JPIA agencies in the area. Turned out it was just us that were available to come that particular day. So, but it's a good thing for all of us to get that training. So I'll point those things out. If there's anything that, you know, caught anybody's attention in the report, I'll be glad to try and answer for you.
So how long has it been since we had a no leaks month?
Actually, not too long ago. Yeah. Yeah. They happen every once in a while. I think here recently we had a no leak month. So it happens, but it's just not that often.
But yeah.
I'll pull that out. I'll pull that out next month, and I'll share with the board when we had the previous no leak month. Yeah, you just jinxed us, Kurt.
who attended the meeting with the Belmont PD? For security?
Oh, God, it was a captain, lieutenant, two people.
Oh, from,
Belmont PD, the two officers that came out to the
Yeah.
yard, I can't.
But from our.
From our
team,
side.
who-
Oh,
Brenna, myself, Michael Anderson, Dustin Swift, and Stan Olson.
yeah.
Yeah, how did that go? Okay. Next question, got it.
Yeah.
It was a productive meeting. And one thing we did do is we got them a Sonatrol badge that
Yeah.
basically says, Belmont PD. Then they have a box
There you
of a
go.
variety of keys and things back at their headquarters, so that's going in there, so if they ever do need to access within our yard, they probably won't bring it on site as they're responding, but they'll be able to have someone else come and bring out
Yeah.
the badge and they can access the gate, so that was one very productive thing that came out of that meeting.
Yeah.
Any other new development from the incident?
Nothing tangible, nothing, no one's been arrested, nobody's,
I know nothing.
they're working on it. They're
Question.
doing.
On that roll-up door, the one that was busted, was it busted from the inside out?
Yeah,
or
they
from
drilled
the-
the truck through it,
From the
from
inside
the
out?
inside, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, not from the outside in.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I.
You
thought.
can hear it on the audio tape, the Sonatrol audio from
So
Sonatrol.
how did they get in?
They came in through the back door that faces 101.
Jimmy did open.
They jimmied it open.
So we've since put plates
That-
on the doors so that you
That
can't jimmy
door
them
is
now.
a metal door, right?
It's a metal door. But you can still reach in between where the,
What the catch is?
yeah, the catch is, yeah, yeah. So we put a plate over that so they can't do that again.
All right,
That does remind me, I think we probably should get that too. We don't have the 2x2 schedule, do we?
We don't. And this is probably a good time to get that scheduled because they
Oh.
just announced the hiring of their public works
Oh.
director, so.
Yeah.
Which I
And we
believe is
did say
starting at the end
July.
of the month, right?
It's been a year. so-
Yeah, so now that that
Crazy.
person's on
Yeah.
board, they'll likely be involved.
Anything else for Rhonda?
Mhm.
Okay, general manager?
So when Jubin mentioned you guys were at a party talking about CIP, it reminded me that I actually was at a party a few weeks ago. I just happened to talk to some friends of friends. And met the people who bought Ron Leitner's house.
Oh, I met them,
Hear
I
about-
met them, I met her on Saturday.
That's really funny. And what she said, and the thing that stuck out is, she's like, man, Mid-Peninsula, that's like the only utility I don't hate. So that was a good, that's a full quote we'll put on the website.
Yeah, well, it's a spokesperson for the rating.
Customer
increases.
And then they ranted about PG&E and everything else, but they
Our
don't hate us.
law firm, one of our mottos is lawyers you like, so you guys could be utility.
Yeah. Until we raise rates.
Thanks, Ted.
For now. Yeah, so that was fun. So I have on here, ASM positions filled, and that also means that we are fully staffed with 22 full-time folks, which feels really good, and yeah, we're getting a lot of stuff done, a lot of operation stuff, it's just moving so much more smoothly, even when people are out on vacation and sick, it's like, we still have folks to get it done, so it's really good. I was just at the GM Summit, the CSTA GM Summit Conference. So I did a pre-work, conference workshop on Sunday, passing the torch, how to recruit, engage, and carry your dream team forward, and it was really helpful because it was really worked on. Everyone there, was a GM sharing stories and whatnot, and so I shared our recruitment strategies, the, 4-day work week, the succession planning. I mean, a lot of agencies aren't doing succession planning, anything related to that, so, they took that really positively. And actually after the workshop, folks from CSD came up to me and said, hey, can we write some stories highlighting what you're doing at, what Mid-Penn is doing in the CSDA, publications and stuff, their website and their journal and stuff, so.
Cool.
So that was kind of fun to kind of get that, like, no,
Yeah.
you're being innovative, this is great, we want to recognize and put that out there, as strategies that other folks can use, so. If you recall, there was a really scary, nasty voter initiative that was potentially on the ballot in November that could have absolutely devastated really all local and I think even state governments funding mechanisms. It was a specter, you all passed a resolution opposing it. And so did hundreds of other agencies. And fortunately, the Supreme Court invalidated it. It will not be going on the ballot at all, which is great. The kind of bad news is the folks who are supporting, it's really 7 entities that supported it. 7 big companies that have a lot to gain from privatizing government services. Said they're not done, but CSDA and all of the other entities that they have collaborated with are working to strategize and be prepared for it. So it'll be an ongoing battle for all of us, but at least we have good news right now. Climate resiliency bond, we signed a support letter for that, and given that we could potentially be written into it, that hopefully that is good news. There is another SB 366, which we signed a support letter on behalf of. There's information in your packet on that. I'm just looking if there's anything that's really worth discussing, given how late it is. The Lasco Special District seat did go to Virginia Shane Curley. She was the only one who was nominated by anyone, so she gets the seat. I've also asked the other special district representative, Katie Martin, to come speak at a board meeting in September, just so you can meet her too. As well, so rather than going through anything else on here, any questions about any of the other items listed in my report?
No.
Comments?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Item B, director reports.
I'll just say that I read an interesting, report about a scientific article that said that if you take the PFAS forever chemicals in a brine and run UV light over it, it destroys the chemicals. And I thought that was interesting because of purified water. What do you got there? You got a brine and you have UV systems. So something we might want to keep in mind at some point.
It's really interesting. That's,
I know. Salty water.
So you have to add salt to it, get a brine or not?
I don't know what the brine concentration was. It
Wow.
might be much higher than what we would get,
Right.
but I can find an article. Pulling it out.
sure that research is making waves, because previously everyone, said the only way to remove PFAS is through membrane, but I guess if you're brining the water, then you need either a membrane system or distillation, I don't know.
Yeah, distillation or boiling or something.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Either way, you spend a lot on energy, but
Well, the membrane from a purified water, you would remove it
you'd
from,
be doing it anyways. Yeah.
but it still exists. This then destroys it.
Yeah.
That's the advantage.
Interesting.
With the UV system that you already have there.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's sort of odd if you have to buy salt in order to create the brine in order to destroy the PFAS to just.
But when you push your wastewater through a membrane, you're leaving behind the brine.
Yeah.
I don't know what the concentration is relative to what they need, but
Right.
yeah, you've got something that's 5 times the dissolved solids that you had originally.
Yeah.
Just for me.
I went to HIA this month they had a discussion about the Caltrain electrification project,
Oh,
and their schedule for that.
for this right here, or for?
Yes, for the whole, they're supposed to open up for passengers in November. This year
For the peninsula.
for the peninsula. So you'd be able to take an electrified train from San Jose to San Francisco.
Hmm.
So they are running they are running, each car that they take delivery on, they have to get 1,000 miles of running time to make sure that the actual delivered train carriages are up to snuff. And so they run those on weekends and so on. And then they're going to be putting them in service over time, starting, I guess, in September. But they will have full service in the fall. So you may have seen them, but they're on the track periodically.
Well, we had a finance committee meeting too.
We did have finance
We
meeting,
did that too. And we
and it
discussed-
was some of the
discussed the
stuff
budget
that we
we
saw
approved
today.
Yeah. And it's good to be back.
And I have nothing to report.
Vice President Jordan, I forgot one thing under my report, it's a
Yes.
good time. City of Belmont achieved accreditation in their Public Works Department with American Public Works Association. They're one of 200-ish agencies in the whole nation to achieve this accreditation, so it's a pretty big deal. So I'll be there Tuesday, wearing my American Public Works Association hat and presenting it at their council to them, so.
Oh,
And asking for paving dollars. It's July 9th. I guess it is a following, sorry, not this Tuesday.
They just had.
Actually, might ask you for your speech ahead of time. I want to know what you're gonna say.
Okay, do we have any communications?
No.
Okay, and we are not going into closed session, so I will adjourn us at 10:17.